as I swung back around to facing Leo, he was looking right at me and he goes, "Stay in it," like a warning. And I was like, oh no. And I looked down and got myself back into character and looked back up at him, and he gave me a nice little nod. And the fact that he could see it, that all I did was just shift whatever inside and look back up at him, but he could see that I was back in character. Yes. Coming from him, especially, that was amazing. That was the best.
Violating your space? Man, come on. What kind of podcaster are you, brother? We're not even in the same room here. We're talking on the internet. Like, man. Welcome to Additional Crew, the spoiler-heavy review show where we choose whatever random film we want to talk about. This episode, we bring you When Their Enemy Resurfaces After 16 Years, a group of ex-revolutionaries reunite to rescue the daughter of one of their own. I'm, of course, talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's, we'll just call him PTA for short from here on out, newest feature, One Battle After Another. A film loosely based on Vineland by Thomas Pynchon, and one that is looking like a surefire bet to win a few Oscars. We'll review the film. And you know what? It's really cool. We also have an interview with Tisha Sloan. She played the role of Willa's teacher, opposite Bob, in one of the more memorable sequences in the film, in my opinion. Awesome interview. Thank you, Tisha, first off, for showing up talking to us. Before we jump into all that, and we will momentarily, let me introduce your co-host. I'm Nick. With me is Willie. Willie, you're a very knowledgeable man when it comes to the Oscars and the Academy Awards. Since this episode is releasing the week of the Oscars, you want to give me some predictions?
Yeah, I got you, Nick. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about One Battle. It's one of those movies that was getting hyped up for Oscars just because of the cast, and PTA is always in the mix at the Oscars. So going into this, I had expectations that it would be an awards player, but I think maybe a little spoiler about my feelings on the movie. I've already talked about it a bit, but coming out, I remember leaving the theater and being like, yeah, it came out in September. I saw it and I was like, yeah, this is going to be an awards contender. I can say that pretty confidently because it has a good mix of everything the Oscars like, which is, PTA movie, really stellar cast, great ensemble, a big epic theme that's also timely. You can look at like recent nominees and picture winners, like Sinners is another great example of an epic movie that has a great cast, very timely themes. It's basically catnip to the Oscars in a lot of ways. And I think Best Picture this year is between One Battle and Sinners. I'm still going to lean towards One Battle because of the genre. It's hard for a horror themed movie to win Best Picture. I think the last was, and obviously a different genre of horror, but the last was, I believe, Silence of the Lambs, nearly 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think Sinners has an uphill battle there. It did win Best Cast at the Actor Awards, but One Battle won PGA. But I'm excited. I'm leaning towards One Battle, but I think any Oscar race where you really don't know who's going to win Best Picture until the envelope comes out is always exciting. It's been a few years since we really had that. You can look at like Oppenheimer from a couple years ago. That was winning all the precursors. And so having a little bit of race is exciting, but I do think that One Battle is going to win Best Picture. I think PTA is a lock to win Best Director. For his directing, producing, and screenwriting, I think he's been nominated like about 14 times total in his 30-year career, and he's never won an Oscar. So he definitely has a big overdue narrative there. So I think of all the categories going into Oscar night, I think PTA, in my opinion, is probably the biggest lock to win any award. So definitely look for him for Best Director. Best Actor is definitely a race. Timothée Chalamet, who would be my vote, was leading a lot of the precursors like the Golden Globe, Critics' Choice. The movie had some controversy because of some stuff that happened with its director, and it kind of fell off a little bit in early voting or early awards, for that being Marty Supreme. But I think the race is between him and Chalamet for Marty Supreme and Michael B. Jordan for Sinners, who most recently won at the Actor Awards and had huge standing ovation. It was a really great speech. I believe that no actor, little trivia, I believe that no actor has ever won a Best Actor Oscar with their only precursor award having been a SAG Best Actor award. So if Jordan does win a Best Actor Oscar, he would be the first ever, which is kind of an uphill battle.
Let me ask you a question about this. So,
Yeah,
if you haven't seen Sinners, spoiler alert: Michael B. Jordan plays two characters. Does he win two Oscars?
it's funny you asked that. I actually saw someone in earnest commented this on this Oscar subreddit I follow, and there's a little fun discourse. But someone actually was wondering that if anyone has won before, and the answer is no. I don't remember off the top of my head who it was, but there has been one other person who's won an Oscar for playing two characters, and I don't remember who it was. So look it up.
It couldn't have been Nick Cage during I think it was Steel Magnolia or. That sounds crazy, but he was actually really good in that role, and he played two different people.
He was in Steel Magnolias.
Can't remember if Steel Magnolias or just Magnolia.
Tom Cruise should have won for Magnolia, PTA film. No, there was some actor like Nick Cage or somebody. Adaptation. That's right. He was nominated for Adaptation. I think he won. He didn't win the actor Oscar, but he won a bunch of awards for that.
That's what it was Adaptation. I don't know where Steel Magnolias comes from. That's the brain doing some weird.
It's orchids. The movie Adaptation has orchids.
Okay.
Your brain's in the right place.
There's something happening there. I always thought that. Okay. Anyway, that's the only other person I remember doing this and being very successful at it.
I think he won a Golden Globe. I'm a really big awards buff. I have an encyclopedia brain that operates on like 90% capacity. So. But I think he would be the very first Best Actor winner for playing two roles, and I'd like to see him win. But it's definitely up in the air, and there's a small possibility that a Leonardo could pull in a surprise Best Actor win. I think if Leo wins Best Actor at the Oscars for One Battle, it will be clearer if One Battle just seems to be sweeping throughout the night, and then it gets to the Best Actor category towards the end. It's like, okay. You can usually get a sense. Best Actress is the only major category where One Battle is not nominated. Chase Infinity was up for a bunch of precursor awards. She hasn't won anything yet. I guess the producers in PTA decided to campaign Infinity in lead actress over supporting, which I'm kind of feels like category fraud. I don't think she's the leading performance in the movie, but they didn't want to distract from Tiana Taylor's performance, who they're pushing. There's a lot of great performances in this, so it's kind of hard to pick and choose. But Infinity did get left out. I think that Jessie Buckley for Hamnet has swept basically every major and minor precursor award, so expect her name to get called for Best Actress. Supporting actress is by far, at least in my opinion, the hardest category to call. We had Tiana Taylor from One Battle win the Golden Globe. We had Wookie Massara from Sinners win the BAFTA award, which is the British version of the Oscars. We had Amy Madigan from Weapons win the SAG award and the Critics' Choice Award, and the critics' prizes from various cities and whatnot have been pretty all over the place. So I don't have a prediction. All bets are off. It's going to be exciting. I'm pulling for Madigan for Weapons just because I love horror being recognized.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because here's my bias, right? Whenever horror is introduced into one of these scenes, I just desperately want it to win, because you mentioned Silence of the Lambs, right? But before that, the only other one is The Exorcist. They don't let horror win, and it's just they don't like it that much, which okay, yeah, sure, fine. And I would just love it, because especially recently, it feels like horror's taken on a whole different kind of tone. It's no longer the schlock it was, and I like schlock, so don't get me wrong, I'm not talking crap, but it's no longer that. It's really trying to elevate and be like this larger genre that expresses more human emotion and human feelings.
And it's getting its due, in more award shows. And I agree. There's been a term that I think you're referring to called elevated horror, which I think started about 8 years ago. It kind of became common in film vernacular. I think Ari Aster kind of perpetuated that with Hereditary and some of his earlier work. But then we've seen the horror genre expand from having both, elevated horror, quote unquote, with, more human emotional themes. And then we've also just gotten, uh, in my opinion, higher quality horror in general, like Weapons, just so much thought put into the script and the plot development. We're just getting really high quality, good, scary horror. And it's exciting. I know. So I'm pulling for Madigan.
I mean, if I was for one, Weapons over Sinners, unfortunately, but that's not the way it's shaken out. But also last year, I wanted The Substance to win really, really badly because I thought that movie was absolutely fantastic, and of course, it wasn't meant to be.
And that's another great example. Like we wouldn't see, even though it's a movie about Hollywood, so that makes it a little easier for awards bodies to get into. You wouldn't have seen a movie like The Substance get nominated for Best Picture 10 years ago. Not even close. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm loving the track that we're going on with mainstream horror for both box office awards and again also horror. Going on a tangent here, but also horror is such a great genre to prop up and give kudos to, because there's often such lower budget, so you can make so much money off of a great horror movie. And word of mouth spreads, like it's just a very easy box office success. So I think Madigan would be my choice, but I really have no idea. And then supporting actor was really uncertain for a while there. I think Stellan Skarsgård won the Golden Globe for Sentimental Value, which I've still not seen, but it's on my list. That's kind of a more classic Oscar Beatty family drama performance, and he's also someone that's overdue for an award. But later on in the season, also speaking of horror, and Jacob Elordi won supporting actor at Critics' Choice for Frankenstein, which was a huge upset. So then he was looking at as maybe the front runner there.
That's interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Another performance you wouldn't see even nominated 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But I think deserved. But then in the past couple weeks, we've seen Sean Penn, who is, speaking of someone who's not overdue, he's already won 2 Oscars. He won the BAFTA and the SAG Award for supporting actor back to back. And he's my pick to win on Sunday night at the Oscars. And I think he's probably my favorite performance of the year in any category. So I'm a little biased there, but I'm pulling for him. I just thought he was sensational. And I think if him and Madigan both win the supporting roles or the supporting Oscars, that would be like the best 1-2 villain punch I think we've ever seen at the Oscars. They're just both such great villains. That would be so fun. Like I would love that.
I had to let you go off because now I'm going to give my completely unsubstantiated opinions on what should have been here. Didn't show up. I think no other choice should have been nominated. Come on, like I know we're probably in like Korean fatigue because they won one time in the last 10 years, but No Other Choice was a fantastic film.
It wasn't even up for best international feature, which blows my mind.
I hear that Korea doesn't like Park Chuk-won, or I'm mispronouncing his name. Park Wang-chuk.
Yeah.
They don't like him very much because he made the Leaving Korea film.
Okay.
So they didn't nominate him themselves, and I think that's what happened with that. But come on. And for best actor, I really would have loved to see Jesse Plemons from Begonia. That performance, regardless of the rest of the movie, even the rest of the movie is great, but that performance was so phenomenal, it elevated the film. So to not see his name in there kind of upset me a little bit.
I agree that if he'd been nominated, he would have been my pick to win. He's so good in that movie. The other one I wanted to give a shout out to, I'm not upset about this because we had such great acclaim for horror this year, but I would have loved to see Sally Hawkins Best Actress for Bring Her Back.
Okay, that's fair because man, she really did a great job in that movie, making someone so evil, and yet at the end, a tragic character as opposed to just complete evil.
She was, I mean, I don't want to pit people against each other, but as great as Madigan was, I think that Hawkins, in my opinion, gave the best performance in a horror movie this year.
That would be a hard movie to get into the Academy Awards. You're like, hey, go watch this, guys, and everyone's like, oh my god, what is that kid doing with that table?
That knife. Anyway,
we won't give spoilers to Bring Her Back. Go watch that film though. It's not in here. Enjoy that one. That one's crazy. It's awesome. Okay, so let's go back to One Battle After Another. Let's start talking about this film. So this is Paul Thomas Anderson film, as we talked about. It is starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Chase Infinity, Teyana Taylor, and myriad of other people. There's quite a large cast to this. This is what I would call the main little portion.
Mhm.
But the story is one of past revolutionaries kind of failing at their mission. I don't really know if that's necessarily the part. They didn't necessarily fail at the mission, but the mission didn't ultimately lead to what they wanted it to. And they got caught, and someone ratted them out. Teyana Taylor's character ratted them out. And then we kind of see the repercussions of that 15 years down the line, and what it looks like when it's way more complicated than that. I'm breaking it down very simply because there's paternity, there is personal vendettas, there is a lot of pot, and the idea of bureaucracies. There's a lot of little themes in this. And as opposed to breaking down the story itself, which I don't think at any one point is overly complicated, when you're watching the movie, everything falls into place really well.
Mm-hmm.
The themes here, I think, are really what's important. This has been a movie that's both been described as woke and anti-woke. It's been described as boasting up the power of revolutionaries to overtake the political landscape, and then at the same time totally making fun of revolutionaries and saying that what they do doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie where I don't think you get a simple answer from. And anyone who's trying to tell you there's a simple answer to what is going on right now is probably wrong. And it's a movie that I also think, at the end, really boasts the power of the future generations and just youth in general. And it makes it very clear that youth is always the ones who will save themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Poignant message for right now, right? Because we see in the very first scene, I'm fairly certain it's the very first shot, we see a detention center. I mean, if you haven't been around right now, a detention center for immigrants is a pretty big issue that we're having at this moment. It's probably one of the largest issues that we're having at this moment. So we have a villain. We have Sean Penn as the villain. I'm going to ask you some questions as we go throughout this, Willie.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be judgment calls. They're going to be opinions. We don't necessarily know all the answers. The whole first part of this film, that the first 15 minutes or so, the focus is on Perfidia. And I think at that time he's still Ghetto Pat. He's not Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Their relationship, and then bringing Willa into the world, or Charlene into the world at that time. And this kind of like quasi standoffish Lockjaw, who is also probably the father of the child because he is blackmailing Perfidia into sexual acts. I'm going to ask you a loaded question right up front. I'm going to get this one out of the way.
Let's hit it.
Was Lockjaw raping Perfidia?
I think that the movie itself and the character dynamics, because we know so little about, and we can get into this, it's been a criticism of the way Paul Thomas Anderson writes Black women. It's been a criticism as Perfidia's character. I think that the way her character is written and portrayed is like, we don't really know her internal monologue at all. I mean, she portrays this avoidant, becomes an ex-revolutionary who like is simultaneously emotionally invested in her passion for her community and her project, but also like her motives and like her reasoning behind her actions is also very, very unclear. So it's really hard to gauge if there is a power dynamic that is purely, Lockjaw controlling Perfidia, or if it's more balanced and she has power over him and she feels like she has power over him, or maybe it's, it's really hard to say. And I think that's a really obviously uncomfortable conversation to get in, but it's necessary because of how the power dynamic is played on screen. Because if you look at it at surface level without any context, it really feels like, yes, he is using his power over her to, bring her down, rape her, control her, blackmail her. But at the same time, like, we don't know her character's motivations and what she feels about the situation, and her character isn't giving very much depth. And all that to say, like on the surface, that sounds pretty bad, just to say like it feels like it could be done really very toxically, and just with the lack of nuance there could be really, really, really problematic. But I don't know. I think that their characters' interactions and dynamic is left purposely vague, and I think that's important, not just to keep the film like from going off the rails or being problematic or being too whatever. I think it's done in a way because her character is meant to be a mystery, and that's part of why her character works for me. So I guess to answer your question, I don't know.
Nope, this is a totally fair answer. I think the one scene that like makes it muddies the water for me is that first scene where she's got the gun on him and he's asleep and she wakes him up and then she's like stand up, and I don't mean on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unclear because this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, her doing that with a gun on him is bad. I think we would agree like that's not good, but also like the complicatedness of the whole entire situation where the government always had the power and she's the one taking it back, and it's this power dynamic thing that's going on here and what that means. I don't think there's a good answer here. And I had to ask that question because it leads me to the second question, right? Willa and Charlene and Perfidia's lack of wanting to be a mother. I think you could read this in two main ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be more than that. This is just how I got it when I was watching it. So I got, first off, Perfidia as a revolutionary is inherently selfish because she wants to be the revolutionary. She wants to change the world. She doesn't want to change the world for the people around her. She wants to change the whole world. And she wants to be known as the person who changes the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So being a mom is the most selfless fucking thing you can do, like, because you have to just give yourself up to this person. You're not going to change the world for anyone but this baby.
It completely contradicts like what her, at least what we perceive her motivation to be. Yeah.
And so there's that element. But then the other element is that if she knew Lockjaw was the dad and this was a non-consensual relationship and it was born of that, but she couldn't admit that, it puts the baby in a whole different light in her eyes. This is where I would go as like the background of the character. Because I the first time I watched it, I was 100% on the, like, she's being selfish. She just doesn't want to have to deal with this baby. And the second time I watched this movie, I actually started seeing it the different ways. The way she was looking at the ground after she was leaving the hotel room with Lockjaw, the way like she just looked genuinely uncomfortable outside of the scenes where she was using her sensuality to get what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well, okay, maybe her not being there for Willa is because she couldn't separate Willa from what she was fighting at this point.
Yeah.
She knew it was Lockjaw's kid, and every time she would look at the baby, she's like, that's Lockjaw and what he did to me so I could keep this whole thing going, and now suddenly I'm supposed to stop because he did it to me and I had a baby.
You can't deal with that. I mean, even like the idea of her getting an abortion is like, at least obviously she's not going to have that conversation with Bob because that leads to a whole other question of like, well, do we want to have a baby? She just kind of up and leaves after having the baby. And I'm giving just like the timeliness of the events and her character, like that might not even be an option or, a safe option for her because they're in hiding. And on like revolutionaries on the run. So there's sure an extreme amount of complicated emotions there. And I agree. I think the second viewing, I saw her character as a bit more nuanced. The question that I had, and that can still confuse me even more after the second viewing, and maybe I'm curious if you had this feeling as well, or if maybe you picked up on an explanation, but it almost seems like the first interaction with her and Lockjaw is not their first meeting. It seems like there's some kind of, unless, she sees this guy and she sees an opportunity to take the power back and like humiliate him and abuse him. And he's just like, oh, all right, I'm into it. Like from the get go, it seemed like there was some familiarity there, even if they hadn't had that sexual power dynamic come up previously. It did kind of give me a sense of like, maybe she's aware of his camps and all these things that have been going on and that they've interacted before. That's the kind of a sense I got. I don't know if you felt that way as well.
I didn't, but it's not that I couldn't see it, because actually it would make a lot of sense, because she was 100% right there for it immediately. She knew exactly what to do, and he was right there for it too.
Yeah.
So the only other answer is there's like this instant connection between the two of them where they both kind of get what they're into, right? Which, okay, sure, fine. he becomes obsessed afterwards. All right. But the idea that she knows wouldn't shock me.
Mhm.
Um, I hadn't thought about it. I don't think it's like there was anything there to give that a backstory necessarily, other than intuition that they've talked to each other about this before.
Yeah.
So
E- ex- exactly. And yeah, it's I mean, and also that I think that may be purposely left vague. I mean, I think it's inherently a little convenient and problematic to just automatically assume that, like, this sexy woman of color comes in and she like is able to have this control over this military man because he's, it's playing into both stereotypes, like this dumb uh shitty conservative military guy is just like obsessed with and fetishizes black women, and then also this black woman, her main contribution to her mission is using her sexuality to influence him. It feels like it feels. I mean, yeah, it feels problematic. It feels a little bit too convenient for the plot as well. So I think that my interpretation of like maybe there is already history there, kind of conveniently allows it to be like, oh, okay, this is why the dynamic is the way it is. Um, so I think that's definitely, it's very nuanced, but I think definitely a warranted criticism there of like just kind of using fetishization and lazy writing to justify like the immediate dynamic between them when it's not fully explained.
well, and part of it for me, the reason I asked this question is because the first viewing, I just didn't take this like away from it at all, and I hadn't maybe been paying enough attention. But the second viewing, when it took it away from me, it made Perfidia so much more. I don't know, like it's a character you could actually care for, and the decisions that she's making actually seem kind of, uh, you have empathy for her as opposed to just judging her as someone who wants to be, the number one, and that's the only thing she cares about.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if this is what happened, and that's the reason she has the baby, and she knows that, and she's watching someone love that baby all the time, but she can't love the baby the same way herself because she still sees the violence that was perpetrated against her. To me, it changes the tone of the beginning part of that movie very like drastically to the part where when she gets the note at the end of the movie, it's just a completely different emotion. It's much hard. It hits much harder
Yes.
emotionally when she actually reads the Perfidia's letter.
I agree, and it gives more insight into her character without revealing too much, which I really like. I think that I don't understand the criticism of Perfidia's character being a cliche or a stereotype or one note, or like, say saying PTA doesn't know how to write women, especially women of color. Not because that dynamic between her and Lockjaw isn't explored enough. There's definitely criticism warranted there, and there's a problematic inherent power imbalance there that it needs to have some more nuance in order for it not to be problematic inherently. Having said that, I don't think her character, like, just because we see her as like this badass woman who uses her sexuality and abandons the family, like, I do see her, and especially after a second viewing, I agree. I see her as just a deeply flawed and nuanced character, and one that, you know, probably a lot of different motivations for her that we don't explore, but it's important that we don't explore that because her character is meant to be this catalyst for the rest of the plot. She's meant to be this, complex revolutionary who abandons her family. And if we got too much into her own head and her own emotions, it would take us out of the rest of the movie. She's supposed to be this background character who sets up the initial events of the film. And I mean, like, just because she is this badass revolutionary, like, it's clear that like she does have, at least some feelings for her community and her purpose and her drive. And I'm sure she's dealing with, like, her character's dealing with an immense amount of trauma and avoidance. Like, she probably has like some avoidant personality tendencies, and that's why she leaves and abandons her child. Like, we don't know all this, but at the same time, that part of her character outside of a dynamic of Lockjaw, we don't need to know that because her character is rich and complex, but we don't have to come out and just say that. Like, it just inherently is a rich and complex character, and that, I think, that works really well in the film. I don't agree with the controversy over her character being one note. I don't think her character is one note at all.
I think if anything, if you were going down the one note path, even like I think you could make an argument that it's just another one of those things that points out kind of like the flaws that exist within the revolutionary sort of community, Where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so you want to do all this badass stuff and you want it all to work out, but you don't have any idea what it's like once you have a family. Like things do change and you do feel different. And that level of depth in conversation and ideology doesn't exist. And it doesn't
Hmm.
really exist on either side. So this isn't a one side versus the other. It's just, calling out like you can be a badass revolutionary, but what happens when life comes out at you and all of a sudden it's here and you have to deal with these life things.
Hmm.
And if you're like going down the whole path of ideology of revolutionary, there's no answer.
No.
How do you raise a baby to be a revolutionary in a revolutionary family? Like it doesn't exist. It's not. And we see like, Leo completely kind of abandoning it, Bob, Pat, whatever version of his name is you want to say at this name at that time. You see him completely going, I got a kid now, I got to deal with this, you
Yeah.
know? And she's like, no, I'm a revolutionary, though. That's my identity. And it's like, okay, but you're also a mom. But a revolutionary was so implanted within her, and there's nothing there that tells you how to deal with this. It just tells you how to go and take ownership over other things. Not ownership, but take power
Yeah.
from systems where you don't have power, right? And we see her continue to try to do that. And I think, I don't know. I'm kind of on a limb on this one because it's never really stated, but this is kind of what I ended up getting from it. Was like, it was just revolutionaries aren't family people.
Hmm.
This ideology is not a complete ideology for how to live life.
Or yeah, and like that's why I like about the film how you mentioned it being both, on the surface level, both woke and anti-woke, because in the way that it makes revolutionaries like look, like buffoons, or just kind of silly, is because like is inherently community oriented and important their mission and drive is, without any communication or stabilization. It's like, what do you have there? You have this great idea, but like there needs to be more depth to their actual like purpose and drive. Otherwise they're just doing things for the sake of doing things, and like what is that? How does that change things for the better? And you mentioned at the end the importance of like the youth and like the next movement, the youth continuing on this purpose and this drive. And I took that away as a very important theme in the movie, but also like it also helped me recognize how important communication between communities is in order for things to work and be successful and change to actually happen. That was the big message I got from the film, is that like the revolutionaries are, successfully going into, immigration detention centers and rescuing immigrants and all these things. But when they become more decentralized and, that's when things fall apart. And like the message is that like you need community is the savior of the revolution, something along those lines.
I think that, and a mixture of being an insurgent, right? Like inserting yourself into these places. And I don't mean insurgent is like how you'd hear it normally. I mean, literally just inserting yourself into situations where you're not really a part of, and then taking power from that is different than the community aspect, because we see the community aspect through like the sensei, right? And what he's doing in Backton Pass, because he's created, like he says, a Mexican Harriet Tubman situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it works shockingly well.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's because he has the community focus in mind, and he works and he communicates with people, and there's a system, even though it's still a revolutionary, simple, decentralized, whatever system, it thrives because of the communication and the support of one another in the community. And when things go by the wayside of the revolutionaries, and Lockjaw's team starts cracking down on them, it's because, they split off, Perfidia leaves, like there's all this chaos, and there's just a breakdown of what they had originally, at least on paper, what they had originally stood for.
Yeah, yeah. I do love the one line, and this is kind of jumping all over the place. Like I said, I think this movie is going to be more about themes than the actual plot itself.
Yeah.
The line that Benicio del Toro's sensei character says, where he's like, "We've been doing this for hundreds of years."
Mm-hmm.
Is like such a nice little line that is kind of almost just thrown in there. It's not like a part of a major conversation that feels like it was centered around this line, but it just puts into perspective the panic that everyone has about what's going on and like how scared they are. And yet this guy who's dealt with this in not him in particular, but like even within like the lineage and you talk about like genetic trauma at this point, right? Like he knows how to deal with this. And he knows it's like, okay, well, it's going to be okay or it's not.
Yeah.
You just do what you can and you keep moving. That's
Yep.
it. You can't control these situations once like it gets out of your hands.
And I love that his character is little in the film that he is. His character feels so fleshed out enough that he's not just like this. He could have been this cliche, like, oh, like, martial arts, like Zen type teacher who's like, oh, we just got to be positive and like we'll get through this. And he is that way, but his calm collectedness feels very earned because of like the way he operates. This like Harriet Tubman situation. And I don't know, his character just feels very authentic in a way that's not just like a cliche of like this, like I was saying, like this Zen character who's like, I'm going to be positive and like keep things, because he is like this kind of like comic relief sort of character, but like he's also portrayed as extremely intelligent, extremely caring, extremely communicative, extremely intelligent, but also just knowledgeable about different resources and stuff. So his character comes across as being very real, and not just this kind of like savior character.
And I did like that they like let him make a mistake. Like when he sends Bob up on the rooftops. That was clearly a mistake. He shouldn't have done that, right? And Bob falls off. He gets arrested because of it. But I do like that they let Sensei make that mistake and then also make good on it.
Exactly. I do like that. Obviously, it adds more drama to the plot. But if you're saying if he had just been this like character who comes in and fixes everything, it would feel less authentic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, for what we can tell, he was very successful at what he was doing. He got everyone to the church, and that church wasn't one of the places that the strike team had mentioned beforehand. So we just assumed they didn't go to the church. But yeah, so the themes of this film I think are interesting because you have these like little teeny sideways ideas that are lodged in here that it says we're watching a version of something that has happened before. And yeah, this is like it's a more hyperbolic version of maybe current events, right? Maybe like an idea or projection of where we're headed. But there are also characters who've seen this before. There are also characters who've lived through this before because that's the truth. That is the real truth.
Yeah.
Like if you want to know about like all the stuff that's happening in America, just ask the people who've gone through it forever. Like and that could be a preachy message. That could be a terrible message if delivered wrong. I mean, you look at Don't Look Up, right? The movie that was released a few years back. And the hard part about that was it was so direct and it was too in your face and it was telling you what was good and what was wrong. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, we're just shown characters. And these characters embody these ideas. But instead of telling you that this is right or wrong, it just shows you what it looks like.
It shows you what it looks like for their reality in the present. And that reality just feels like they feel like real people. Mm-hmm. And, there's obviously all this chaos going on around them that leads to these events that gives the movie an opportunity to develop and show how they interact in these, various situations. But like the characters themselves, I agree, they do feel just very, they feel like characters that are there and they're not just there to give a message. And I feel like that movie could have easily slipped into that kind of both preachiness, but also the kind of dynamic where there's just so mission driven that becomes their whole characterization. Obviously, I mean, that is the case with Sean Penn's character, but he's playing this, evil villain, Machiavellian nutso. So that makes a little bit more sense.
He's a little different because I think the repression drives him, right? Like he's repressed his true identity for so long that it doesn't exist. It just exists only as hatred right now,
Yeah.
And I mean, once again, you can see the analogy to real life right now if you're looking hard enough. Maybe you don't even have to be looking that hard, to be honest. So there's this whole idea that like each one of these characters represents almost like an idea that exists out there already. Now, I've skipped over it. Bob and Willa as father-daughter duo. We get to see a little bit of development very quickly from them through the school scenes, through the table scenes where she's talking about him driving drunk. And I think what we're shown there feels pretty good. Mm-hmm. You can definitely feel that sort of relationship that they have, right? Where it's like, yeah, he's not really that good. He cares about her and she knows he cares about her. So she cares back, but she's also she's doing the parenting half the time. Mm-hmm. And, single dad, burnout, ex-terrorist, I mean, I guess that's not really necessarily a trope, but you get the idea. Uh,
Yeah,
he doesn't do a great job, but he cares a lot. And when he does want to do a great job, he can.
exactly. And I like that his character, he doesn't portray himself. I mean, then this could have worked because other people in this situation in real life, might have taken this kind of approach, but he doesn't like victimize himself and like, woe is me. Like it wouldn't have worked in the movie, but like also like that would have still been believable if he was, had this self victimization complex, but he really clearly doesn't. He knows that he's not good enough at times, but he does try his best, especially when it's most important to try his best. Um, and I agree. I think that their dynamic, they honestly don't have a whole lot of scenes together, but the very first introduction of them together that really stood out to me is that scene where he comes home late and she, like accuses him of drunk driving. And he's like, I just want you to be honest. You can tell me anything. Like, just be straight up with me. And she's like, I forget exactly what she says, but she's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I'm not the parent here. Like, and she kind of goes into this full mom kind of mode. I enjoy the dialogue in that scene. I like that you were able to get a lot out of their relationship without going over the top. Like, obviously it's a tense scene between them, but at the same time, it's not, it still just feels like a real, two real characters in the situation that feel like real people. And another just little thing I noticed is I liked in that scene that the movie didn't kind of go full on like, but anyway, like Bob's character stayed true to himself, and this is just a little thing, but like when he was talking about her friends, he could have gone off in his thing. He's like, oh, well, is your friend, is it he, she, or what is it? Like, oh, a they or a non-binary, like one of those new things. Like he actually does try, because he does love her, and he's a empathetic, caring person. He actually tries. He's like, he's like, I just want to get the terms correct. They go by they, and it doesn't feel like preachy or awkward. It feels like an actual, you know, uh, um, progressive, concerned dad
Mm-hmm.
who's stoned out of his mind, who's actually trying to find out information about her friends, but also like being protective. And like the way Leo plays that role and that scene is just, in like when her friends come in, like it feels a little over the top at times, but it doesn't just feel like it's played for laughs. They're just their whole dialogue and the way he's like trying to, he loves her, so he wants to like know about her friends and where she's going and what she's doing, but also like he's concerned and being pulled in these directions. It doesn't feel very Hollywood, I guess is what I'm saying. It feels like a real scene.
As someone who is, I'm like full on just millennial, right? I could see like this Gen X, like elder millennial feel from this, because it's like you got both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were old enough to just completely eschew the ways of understanding that people care about what their identity is, and you should also care about what their identity is, and be kind to them, right? But on the other hand, you also grew up with all the comedy and all the ideas that, like, yeah, well, this is how you be tough, and this is how you be man, and this is what you got to say, and this is what you got to do, and this is how you look out for your family. You know what I mean? And these are like conflicting ideas, kind of, in a lot of ways, because on one hand it says accept someone else's reality, on the other, and then the other version is I have to protect my reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so it plays off like that, right? I do care what they want them to say, but I'm also going to come out here and I'm also going to be a hard ass in ways that are going to make them feel uncomfortable, because I want them to be uncomfortable to protect us.
Exactly, and that feels like what Bob's character would feel like. It's not like he's one way or the other. He's both. Like yeah, I think that whole dynamic and that scene was really well done, because like Bob isn't portrayed as just like like, oh, you kids and your identities today, like it doesn't matter because the revolution is where it's at, because he does feel strongly about this like overarching theme of like revolution and community and support for all, but also he does have this more emotional core to him where he like is more, at least compared to Perfidious character, on the surface, has more attachment to like people and like their own like empathy for others' emotions. Like that, his character, I think that comes across as pretty well rounded, and in that scene is a great example of him not like being one way or the other, but like this conflict in between him. And I think it was just so well done.
Yeah, and I also really like with his character in particular, and this is throughout the whole entire film, is like we have this mixture of a character that is not so bumbling that he can't accomplish something, but he's also not a superhero. He's not really a savior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the messaging behind that is really strong, because it does work. It's like, hey, he's trying his best. He wants control over this situation, but he doesn't have enough power to actually get control over the situation. He's going against the United States military in this case, even if it's just one task force. but he's just a dude. And even if he cares enough, and even if he can pull it all together perfectly and things work out the way they did for him, it still won't be enough.
Hmm.
So
It
that's
can't
where,
be.
yeah, and I like that because it was one of those, like, every scene you're watching, things really do work out for him
Hmm.
perfectly. It goes all the way it would need to go, and he would still be too late if Willa wasn't able to defend herself.
Exactly. Or if Sensei wasn't there to, like, get him to the nunnery, or like, yeah, the movie, instead of just telling you all this, shows you through scenes that community is the piece that completes Bob in his quest, family and
Mm-hmm.
community. And I like that it did that in a way that wasn't preachy.
Agreed. Now,
Yeah.
so we have the school scenes, which are fantastic. Tisha, we'll talk about your acting later, but also, like, that scene added a lot to Bob's character himself. Very realistic school scene. We have the dance, which I don't know. I was trying to figure this out, Willie. What year is this movie supposed to be set in?
Well, okay, so they're playing Mo Bamba, which came out in 2018 when I was in college. I do think that the first scene, maybe I'm just, no, I don't think they said it. It felt like the first scene was in 2006, but I could just be imagining that. Um, I don't know. I was like out recently with friends and they were playing Mo Bamba in the club. And, it's a classic at this point. So I feel like kids, the teeny boppers of 2024, might still be playing that at school dances.
It can make sense. The part that, like, confused me with the timeline is when I forget his name, but the guy who is clearly the tech dude for the French 75 is talking
Mhm.
about what phones they can use, and he's like, "Yeah, don't use one of the newer iPhones. Use one of the older ones because they don't check those frequencies anymore." And I'm like, okay, so wait, yeah, 15 years to this, and then the iPhone at least 4 is out at this point, is what I'm hearing. So I can't remember exactly when the iPhone 4 came out. I graduated college, I think, in 2000, or high school in 2009. So someone can do that math; they know exactly how old I am now. And I think those still iPhone 3s. So I was like trying to figure this out because I'm like, what timeline? It's very close to the present, but I feel like it's in the very near future.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because wait, so the scene of iPhone 3 discussion, that is when, like, when Will is a baby, is that right? Okay, because the iPhone came out in 2007, so that would line up with about iPhone 3 coming out 2009, 2010. And if I think she's like 16 in the movie, so that would be like 2026, 2027. That lines up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to figure, because this is clearly a version of it where the military has really locked down on illegal immigrants and also just probably Mexicans in general, because it seems like they've got a completely different level of power with what we see with Lockjaw going around shooting everybody. Maybe that's not a different level of power, depending on what you feel about what you do and don't hear.
It was like about maybe a good 5 months in the future.
Yeah, just like if you call someone a terrorist, you just go and shoot up every single person involved with it. Um, yeah, okay, and I just wanted to ask that question because it was one that popped up in my mind, and I'm like, I really can't figure exactly out. I would love to figure this out exactly. Maybe they said it somewhere, but I don't think they did.
I don't think they did. Yeah.
What we have to get into the Christmas Adventures Club because it's important, and we end up having one of their characters who really just comes in and provides the chaos we need during the final scenes, and it's also like the motivator for Lockjaw to come and find his daughter. Because one thing that I think I forget during this film is that Lockjaw wasn't operating as part of a larger task when he goes into Bacton, uh, Bacton Passing. He was operating his special task force to find French 75 specifically so that way he could get into the Christmas Adventurers Club without
Yes.
playing it that way.
Yes.
Which,
His motivation, the justification he used to his soldiers that answered to him, was that they had discovered an undercover heroin ring within like taco vendors in Bocton Cross, I think was their justification. So it was like a side mission drug ring type thing. And that was the justification he gave to his subordinates, at least.
mm-hmm.
But his overall motivation for going there, yeah, would be to dispose of his past indiscretions resulting in a child in order to get into the Christmas Adventurers Club.
So Christmas Adventurers Club. I mean, we've clearly got Christian nationalism, white supremacists, hidden under like this level of just ridiculousness to kind of point out how maybe to me, I this isn't like by fact anyways, but it's like to me it points out how banal all this stuff is, right? Like it's so stupid. It's the Christmas Adventurers Club, Hail Saint Nick. Like it's the dumbest thing anyone could ever say, and I think that's what makes it scary, is that it's the dumbest thing anyone could ever say. But like, how do you ignore all of this that's happening right now, right? And how do you not see that? Like, I'm not going to get too conspiracy theorist on this show. I'm sure no one wants to know, but like, if we're starting we're trying to cue the start of the Armageddon, this banal small weird clubs like this are pretty important to where we're at in history right now. So like, I think the inclusion of this was very important to the plot, but in ways that I don't know it necessarily impacted the story.
Well, I think I agree. I think the banality of it all, it makes it so sinister because, like, I guess I can pivot real quickly into quasi conspiracy theorists and stuff, but like everything going on with the Epstein files and the elites, like that was also using very, banal language, and it wasn't like this hyper sophisticated, kind of elite, everything going on with Epstein. Like it was just like very creepy in a way that this Christmas Adventurers Club kind of association seems to operate, and I do love I don't know if I'll have to look it up, but I don't know if Thomas Pynchon or PTA came up with that term specifically, but it's just great. I mean, it evokes Christian nationalism, it evokes, Christmas and like white snow. So there's that white supremacist element, at least in my mind there. The whole adventure club also like provides like kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of like cop out, like, oh, we're not like this evil white supremacist secret society, we're just like an adventure club, haha. Like it's just a perfect title for it. I really like that. And I do, we can get into this, but I do want to say, after watching it a few times, that one thing that really stood out to me about how this impacts the story is that if the whole motivation in the whole second half was based on Lockjaw coming back for the French 75 because he had like a personal vendetta and he's coming after to get them again, like it could have still been a really good movie, but it would have felt like just a little bit too Hollywood, perhaps. Like, okay, he discovers where Bob and all these guys are, so he's going to go back on this mission, 20 years later. Okay, like that could be a good movie, but the fact that the motivation is so specifically tied to his, undying motivation to get into this white supremacist club, that he has to dispose of his mixed race daughter from 20 years prior, like that being the catalyst for all of this, I just think it's so well done. Like it actually gives motivation to his villain character. It makes it more interesting than just like this kind of fight sequence between the revolutionaries and the bad guys, like, which again could have been a well done movie, but the nuance between like what his motivation is and where the catalyst of all these events come from is just, I think, brilliant. I just really enjoyed that plot twist.
I really loved / hated the performance by Kevin Tigay. He played Roy Moore, the leader of the Christmas Adventurers Club. He's of course they chose a famous actor from the '70s show Emergency for this, right? Which was just a phenomenal choice, regardless. And he delivers that like creepiest line of all time: "The floor should be so clean we can eat off of it," And he's not. He's not talking about a floor. He's talking about the race. And what he's saying is that this country should be so white that we don't have to worry about anyone.
Yeah.
And just a phenomenal way, because he doesn't seem like he's that evil when you're just listening to him. But if you listen to his words, they're just the pure evil incarnate.
And I agree. Back to your point about it being so banal, is like it on this, like watching the scene, like when he walks through that long staircase and then there's like, she offers him the banana bread and all that. Like it feels so over the top and silly, but like just based on what we've seen in recent events in this past, year in this administration, like it's really not far off from the truth. Like it's unsettlingly, even though it feels so over the top, it's really not. And that makes it so much more unsettling. The timeliness of this movie coming out now it makes it impact harder, and it makes it feel just more disturbing than if it had come out like 10 years ago, I think.
it gives me like this reminder in as far as the way it impacts the movie is like the government and burn after reading. You know what I mean? Where it's like they're so important to this plot, and they're kind of like the ones who are creating all of the issues really that are going on, and yet they just don't really care that much.
That's
They just
great.
don't care.
It's a great reference. Yeah. Well, they're like both incompetent, but also like so apathetic that they're behind the scenes of everything, but at the same time they're not directly involved. And yeah, they're kind of silly. And like I remember J.K. Simmons' character in that movie is kind of uh silly and over the top, but it reminds me of that kind of shadow government
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling you get here.
It was okay. I'm going to go off on a sideways thing real quick. How crazy is it that that movie was using the literal government to show the government, and this movie uses a secret society as a representation of the upper versions of the government? And it's so hard for me not to see this and then think about all of the cool tattoos that Pete Hegseth has about the Crusades all over his body, and then he talks about starting Armageddon in Iran. I'm not going to go too crazy. This isn't that pod, but like unfortunately, the second viewing of this happened just now, and the first viewing happened in December. It's a very different tone during Christmas Adventures Club right now than it was when I first watched this movie. I'll tell you that much.
I agree. With my most recent rewatch, it definitely hit a lot harder. Also, I want to just mention the scene real quick. The fact that the leader's name is Roy Moore, and intentionally or not shares a name with that pedophile Republican Senate candidate from Alabama from like 10 years ago. You remember him?
It's got to be intentional.
Yeah.
There's no way. I would be shocked if it wasn't.
I'm gonna go grab one of these another little black tea thing here. I did want to explore a little bit about Lockjaw's character, and like we were talking about how his arc and his motivation, how it impacts the plot and how it doesn't. What do you think, Nick? What do you think? Like, do you think that he is driven purely on? I mean, we know he's driven to like eradicate Willa's existence in order to get into the club, but how much of his character is pure narcissistic ego and how much is just like a fragile ego and he's so insecure that he needs to be part of his club, or does he actually believe in all these ideals that he's that the adventurers like have passed on to him?
Yeah. So with his character, I think, in my opinion, that so much of it is him having these repressed views, specifically about black women, that he needs to project this image at all costs. And if if he could just accept that, he might have been like a person who could contribute to the world, but instead he will destroy and he will create havoc and he will kill communities just to make sure that everybody thinks that he doesn't have this this draw towards black women.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that yes, moving up is good, and yes, moving up shows that he has accomplished this goal more and more and more, but his character is so driven by this repression that all we are seeing is a reflection of someone who can never be their real self. So they have to be this over the top hyperbolic version of what they are showing.
I agree. And I think that it's also timely just because we see so many people in government and politicians like this that have this control now. And I mean, for, centuries, obviously, that there's such a deep rooted insecurity about not being able to be their true selves. They become this facade that has power. And I mean that in our modern world, that, comes to fruition with both politicians and then people in control of the military and positions of power like that, where you are quite literally like playing a role. Like, you're not just yourself, you become like your career. And in his case, he's this, totalitarian immigration enforcement military officer. So that being able to play that kind of controlling role is just like a perfect marriage for who he is as a person and his insecurity. And I do like for this movie, I mean, I should say, Pynchon, instead of doing this like that, honestly, borderline kind of homophobic choice that you see in a lot of movies at times, where like this evil toxic character is actually closeted gay and that's why he acts this way. I like that they made his true self, like, I mean, also you could say problematic, but someone that fetishizes another race, instead of just making him like deeply closeted. Because I feel like because it brings into themes of racism and the historic oppression of minorities by the military into this equation, instead of just kind of taking the cheap out, like, oh, he acts like a tough guy because he's secretly gay. And that's just an overdone, like, oftentimes just false, kind of lazy, quasi homophobic excuse for toxic masculinity. I like that it's more nuanced than that.
Well, and I think it's based a lot on American history, right? It's like all of the people who, not all of the people, but like a lot of the people who owned slaves back in the day were also using them. They were in romantic relationships with them, and it's like that sort of toxic. Toxic's not even the right word. It's just like this power dynamic that has been so screwed up in our country forever that you could say that this is one of the older power dynamics that has shown. It's like, yes, you are subjugating the people that you were attracted to. I would give you the why, but I'm not a sociology expert, and I shouldn't be just like guessing that off the top of my head. But it's a thing that's been around in America for a long fucking time, right?
Yeah, and I mean in the world, but I like yeah, in the movie is specifically the fact that he's an American military officer. I think that is where you've seen it in our country. In terms of like control over minorities when the U.S. is invading other countries in the name of freedom, or whatever, the whole laundry list of American imperialism, like that is where it comes up. It's us versus the other. It's not just like this insecurity about who we are, but there's the us versus other dynamic that we see at play. And I like that his character so abhorrently portrays that in this movie.
To me, there's not much separating Lockjaw versus, let's say, Virgil, or even Tim Smith, right? It's just like levels of buy-in. Whereas I believe that like Virgil knows that he's kind of what he's doing. He's fully aware of what he's doing, and Tim also pretty close to fully aware of what he's doing, but he needs the money. Lockjaw is so focused on making sure that people don't know that he loves black women that I think he's fully bought in.
Yeah.
And that's where you see the difference. Like, he's the pawn still. He has power and he's the one creating the destruction, but he's the pawn because he believes in the ideas that they're saying more so than just he believes in the goal.
Exactly. So that's where both that narcissistic and fragile ego come into play. And often they would go hand in hand, but I agree that he has this thing to prove about himself. And again, we talked about how we've already talked at length about like the dynamic between him and Perfidia, but like just on the surface, it makes sense that he's someone that is not only sexually attracted to the other, but also attracted to someone controlling him and having that power over him, because he spends every waking moment of his life attempting to have control over his own feelings and emotions, and just everything in his world is all about like he doesn't have control. He's completely out of control. So to have that quote unquote safe space for him to explore that sexually makes just so much sense for his character.
And then it to be the obsession and the only thing he really cares about. Yeah. Okay, so do you think it was an accident that they made Virgil and Tim look like the same dude?
Remind me who plays. I have to look up.
Okay. Tony Goldwyn plays Virgil. He is the liaison for the Christmas Adventurers Club that we see. And then Tim is the would-be assassin, played by John Hugenocker. I certainly pronounced that wrong. But every time they were on screen, I'm like, man, these guys, they made them look the exact same.
They did. I don't know if it was. It was a little intentional. I think that really the thing that stands out to me both about them is the shape of their face and their intensity of their eyes. And I think maybe was intentional, because like the would-be assassin, he is at least believed to be portrayed as kind of like behind the scenes and cool and cunning, and like he doesn't speak as much. Like he's behind the scenes. This is his role to like do things without being seen. And then similarly, the character of Virgil he's purely there to get information out of people. He's not there to be like the person in front of everything or getting attention, but like both of them are so intense and have such violent roles and tendencies that they communicate that violence with their eyes so starkly that I think that the casting is good for that kind of nonverbal communication.
Yeah, it also lends credence to me of like the I don't know what is the word I'm looking for. The fact that they have assimilated so well and they are like a uniculture at this point that they even made the people look the same. You know, they only want to be surrounded by people who look exactly like them. And I mean, these people, I don't think they look as close in real life, but I do think that they were framing them to look almost the exact same for a reason.
I agree. Yeah, and even like in the Christmas adventurers, like even I mean, they're all white guys, but even they have a similar way of greeting each other, obviously, but also just like standing and sitting and their mannerisms just all feel very uniform at times.
So we haven't discussed Willa and like kind of her role in the story very much. And then realistically, I don't think she was actually in the movie nearly as much as a lot of these other folks.
Wait, Nick, I I do want to point out something I
Oh,
have to
go.
acknowledge
Yeah.
is that I thought you were talking about the interrogation officer who again he was not I forgot he was not part of the Christmas Adventurers Club, at least not explicitly. You're talking about the guy in the first initiation scene and the would be assassin. I did not realize those were different actors.
Yeah, they look so similar. It's crazy. It was like they casted like the
Yeah.
guy and his brother, but they're not related, I don't think, not by name
No.
anyway.
Okay. I was going to say, because even like even though there's obviously, you can tell them apart, but even like the interrogation officer that first brings in um, the ever, the very first French 75 is captured, even he looks like them. Obviously, he has more defining characteristics, but even he has that similar look and eyes and disposition. That's funny.
Yeah, the that casting to me is crazy. Like, how did you take? Tony Goldwyn is a dude who you've seen. You know, he's been in a bunch of movies. He always plays the like I'm kind of a corporate dude, but I'm also the bad guy.
Yeah.
And John Hugenocker, I've never heard of this guy, but I was like, whoa. When he walks in and he asks for the pancakes, I definitely thought it was the same guy until he sits up next to the table. He's right next to the other guy. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what's happening right now?
I do remember that now. I guess just like when I think back, I just watched the movie, and I think when I think back, I still blur those characters together. That's so funny.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Okay. So Willa, the Sisterhood of the Brave Beaver, I think it's got a different name. I
Um,
know Brave Beaver is the end part, but
what's the name of a nunnery itself? Is it the? It's. I think they're different. I think they're different here.
I feel like there's a little bit more alliteration here.
I'm just thinking of a scene where Sensei like asks Siri to take them to the location. He's like, Siri, look, direct us to Sisterhood of the blah, blah, blah.
Is it just Sisterhood of the Brave Beaver? No. It's anyway. So we get this like teenager, right, who's lying to her dad about having a cell phone because she's trying to be a normal ass person at the age of 15. And we get to see her kind of like go through a lot of really awful things with barely any knowledge of what's going on to her tracks. This is if you're like, wow, that sounds like what's going on with new generations now. Yeah, I think that's the point.
Yeah.
And so she just has to trust this person because she knows a Gil Scott Heron song. And which awesome song, by the way. Like, you always choose Gil Scott Heron if you have to choose someone for a secret message.
He's so good.
And so Willa's character is interesting because she has a whole entire theme of herself. She is the new generation. Like, she's learning as she goes that like no one can all save her all the time. She does have the bounty hunter who saves her.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time that she is not really in charge of saving herself. People are trying to help her. They're trying to help her, but they can't. She has to stand up for herself at the end. And so the bounty hunter, I've had an idea about what that might mean thematically, and I've thought that it means like his race is called out a lot of different times in this film, and it was my thought was that like, hey, he's a minority, he's not in power here, and that's the sort of people you need is other people who aren't in power to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if you had maybe like a different thought on that because that's a little bit of a shaky reason for me. It was just the one that felt right emotionally.
the idea that his character, his character basically like his race and his minority is central to why he's a savior character, or just that.
Yeah, essentially, because for the story wise, it had to happen because otherwise, Willa's left for dead at this 1776 place. If you don't have that, then what's the purpose as far as like a theme goes for the new generation and how this guy will still stand up for them?
It's well, I think I mean, the surface level of his character is that he's very reluctant to take Willa because, I mean, even though I think he's a bounty hunter and also like a killer. I think that's suggested as well, but he's not going to kill kids. So I guess the compromise there is that he agrees to take Willa to the 1776, which is like some Proud Boy adjacent, like white supremacist border patrol refuge. I'm like still a little confused what it was. I mean, not knowing made it creepier and more sinister though. So, so he like is obviously doesn't work with them, but he's aware of what it is. So he like the compromise is that he takes Willa to them for them to dispose of her or whatever. And obviously his character isn't explored very concretely. I don't know. I think maybe my question here is that like he's aware of this. Well, first of all, he has the moral compass that he's not going to hurt kids. So I wonder if what his awareness of this 1776 place where he takes her is, or if like he's already on the fence and has this moral like unease about taking her there, and then like the white supremacists there, refer to him as racial epithets or like are suggestive to him, and that's like his trigger to like stand up, or does he already have like a preconceived relationship with this group, and then like basically I guess what I'm saying is like it would make more sense if like he is already like morally on the fence and then he goes here and sees that it's an evil white supremacist group without really knowing exactly what it is, and then that's when he decides to like stand up for her. But I don't know, I think this is maybe like one of the weaker points of the movie for me because it doesn't need to be explored in depth, but it was still a little confusing of like, or maybe perhaps like a little bit lazy where it's like the Native American character is the hero because we're like trying to portray the natives as a good, like, you know what I mean, like it's just like it's trying to like make just kind of maybe just like a lazy technique. So I don't know, this is a little hard for me to dissect because I don't really know.
That's fair. I don't think
Yeah.
I necessarily disagree with that. I think there's the option that like it's just it is lazy, and this was what they needed to do to have Willa get broken free. Because I mean, sometimes you need the Deus Ex, right? Like sometimes you
Yeah.
just do. But the other thought that I'm having just as I'm sitting here thinking about it is like maybe this is a representation of people who have moral compasses finally understanding their culpability and what's happening to the next generation. It's like he plays it off as like he cares about what happens, right? But he's willing to take money to deliver the kid to a place where they're for sure going to get killed.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, sure, you're not actually killing the kid, but you're taking the kid to the place where they're going to get killed. It's what's the difference, really? And he
Yeah.
finally recognizes, oh, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I said I did the thing I said I'd never do, the one thing I never do. I basically did that. I need to go change this because otherwise I won't be able to live with it. And it's one of those things like, hey, maybe if more people were willing to actually accept their culpability and what's going on and everything, they could actually help the younger generation. And maybe I'm just getting too far out there with theory crafting in a movie that has an actual plot. That's possible too.
Well, I don't disagree with you because it's never really explained why. There really isn't justification for why he like suddenly has this change of heart. I mean, again, the fact that he's already on the fence about doing this because she's a child. It makes sense. So I guess for like convenience sake, I would like to imagine that he's already on the fence. He already doesn't like this guy. He's not aware of who the people are at 1776, but he probably has an inkling. But then he goes there and sees how he's disparaged, and just sees. I mean, they're Nazi tattoos, they're swastikas, and that they're evil, sadistic people. And he's like, well, okay, this is no better than me just killing her myself. I got to get her out of here. So I think if there's a dynamic where he's not actually does not have an association with Lockjaw or this group ahead of time, he's just known as this bounty hunter killer, and then he realizes that, oh shit, they're white supremacists, like fuck this, I'm gonna get her out of here. That makes sense. We just don't really know. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of is kind of a little bit like, confusing or just like not. It doesn't feel as earned as other points in the movie for me.
Yeah, and I mean, so because immediately after that we get to see the chase that happens somewhere around there. We see the chase that happens with the Christmas adventurers, and they end up shooting Lockjaw because he lied to them. He took them for fools. Once they realized he lied to them, it didn't matter what he did; they were going to shoot him anyway.
Yeah.
And then we also get to see Willa doing the whole stopping the car at the top of a hill, jumping
So
out,
bad.
sitting on the right, and then she protects herself, and she almost loses herself in it. Also, just interesting idea that of all things that are going to stop this crazy underground club, it's just going to be a hill on a road, like, and that there's something poetic in even that, right? It's like this, the simple nature and the simple area that they're in is what ends up being the tool that you need to stop someone who is hell-bent on killing you with a shotgun and is part of a crazy club.
Well, and what I love about that scene too is that it feels simple, but the fact that it's so built up with PTA's cinematography is that like that almost like Hitchcockian suspense with like the up and down of the hill, the up and down is like where it's like you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe you have an idea, but like the ascent is such, it becomes like a character in that scene because the camera's so focused heavily on them going up and down the curves. It's like, well, what's going to happen at the top of this hill? Like what it builds up so suspensefully that like when the final climax is just he gets to the hill and smashes his car. It feels a little bit. I keep saying the word earned, but it feels a little bit more climactic than just like, oh, there's an accident and that's how she gets out. Like there's a build up there that I feel like it makes the scene better.
For sure, and of course is aided by the fact that Bob's got a car that makes a little weird electric whir as opposed to everyone else's.
Yeah.
Funny choice there. Who am I missing? Who have we not talked about? What other parts? We probably didn't talk about Sensei dropping off Bob outside the window and then getting arrested for a DUI, because that's for sure the least aggressive arrest he could get.
We can talk about that in my favorite scenes maybe, but one character I want to highlight that is definitely a smaller character compared to the main cast, but an actress portrayal that I think, again, I don't want to pit the actors against each other because there's so many great roles, but like I think Regina Hall and her character should have been getting more awards attention. Her character, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but
Deandra.
That's right. So she portrays one of the initial members of the French 75, and her character is so important because she's the one that initially rescues Willa from the dance. And speaking of just like subtle performances that are so powerful, her big scenes are obviously like partly in the beginning. Her character isn't developed, but she's there. I think is her character the one that's talking to Bob about Perfidia drinking at the bonfire and like knowing she's pregnant and like kind of being critical of that, or
I believe so. It's either that or she's just like intently staring at it, but I'm pretty sure it's her talking to him.
Okay, yeah, and she's so from the get-go, like we already see like her kind of taking on this, similar to Bob, this kind of more like emotional, humor-centered role within that group of like caring about the unborn child and like protection of one another. Like she already kind of gives that like maternal feeling that, in contrast, even though it's a small scene and subtle, like in contrast to Perfidy's character and what she becomes, it definitely presents a good kind of opposition to that. And then of course her scene is when she rescues Willa and the confrontation of the cell phone and that. But like the scene that stands out for me, her so much and her character, even though we don't get a backstory, though, the scene with her and the interrogator where he's threatening her and she breaks down, but rather she doesn't break down, but she gets emotional, and like you can see the trauma and the uncomfortableness of the scene, and then like all these feelings going through her mind of like like, do I like sacrifice the others to protect Willa, or like it's her emotional range just with her face is so powerful there that I really like her character and her performance, because I do think that even though it's a subtle part of the movie, I think that she really provides that maternal character that we don't really see anywhere else in the movie, both for Willa and for the group. and then just as a person as well. I think that I think her, as small as her character is, it's very important for the overall theme of family in the plot.
I think that, because I agree with you 100%. I think that like Deandra in this film, like kind of what she represents is, it's maternal, but it's also like the true revolutionaries, right? Like you have the people who want to be called revolutionaries. You have your Jungle Pussy, you have your Perfidia, and they're out here doing things that are just so over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you do need that. But underneath it, you have people like Deandra who are taking care of their people, who truly care about what is happening with their people. You know, like 15 years down the line, shit hits the fan. Who's there? Jungle
She
Pussy's
is.
not there. Perfidia's not there. She is. She's
Mm-hmm.
still there, driving it forward. She is the
Mm-hmm.
link that creates the stability that you would need to make this a fuller, like more actual long term movement. You know, so I think she's like a celebration of the people behind the scenes who actually do the stuff that actually make things work for a long time.
Well said. And you can compare her to Sensei's character in that role, that community focus, that organization, and like not to, this criticize Bob's character, because he's a different kind of incompetent that like Perfidia is, but like also like as much as he cares, he's not really out there doing anything. He's just kind of living in a paranoid existence, and he's protecting his daughter, which is in his world and in a lot of ways the most important thing he can be doing. But like he needs characters like Sensei and like Deandra to be there, to be that stable force to actually make these organizations and these mission statements of the revolution thrive. I agree.
And it is interesting that they also give her that same similar role in the movie. You know what I mean? Like she's there to keep things kind of together. She's not there to stand out
Mm-hmm.
particularly, but she's also, again, she's the one standing up for Perfidia's daughter. And she's like, yeah, I know she was trapped, but this isn't her. This is her daughter. She is innocent. She's the one
Mm-hmm.
who's doing the actual work to keep people safe. And that's just to me, that's a powerful message that's just kind of like hidden in there, very like, I don't, I guess not hidden in there, but the nuance there, and like the ability to say, I'm not going to tell you this, but these are the people that are actually making this work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the people who are out there being bombastic. They do get you the credibility to this movement, but the people who actually make it go on for a long time and actually keep the people safe within their thing are what allow the French 75 to go on for 20 years, despite, because I mean, we haven't even talked about like what it means to be like revolutionaries in this film. You know what I mean? Like what is it with the revolutionaries and the gatekeeping and the trying to be cool as opposed to actually caring about each other all the time?
Yeah.
It's just, there's a lot more we could even get into. I'm probably going to move us on to acting simply because we've reached a large amount of time on this already. But of course, is there anything else you want to talk about with the themes in the story, Willie? I let me know.
No, I mean, I think we hit on the points that I wanted to mention. Like my overall like feeling that like you know community and family and the youth are like the big themes of this movie, and I think that what this movie does so well is that it portrays those themes. One, while not being like overly preachy or like just telling you, but like just showing you through character development as opposed to exposition, is great. But also by within those things, we're also able to have these very complex topics like politics and race and immigration, and come up again through character development. And I like that throughout all that it does tie back to those central themes of community and humanity. I don't know. It's really hard for movies to do that, to pull off all those topics at once and still have like a central theme that they can plant a flagpole in and be like, this is like the message we're trying. Obviously, there's, not everything is like, this is how we're telling you to feel, but like everything tying back to those themes is really just really well done.
Fair, fair. Let's talk about acting, and I think we can go through the acting fairly quick here. So, I think what you get from this movie is a whole lot of competent to great acting. I've mentioned that there's a smaller role at the gas station. That seems like the one area where there's maybe wooden acting, but also you could kind of, you could say that that's not the case. This is a person who's acting scared, and I could also agree with that. Past that, I think I have a question. It's less of an issue, more so than I want something. This is where I'm having a hard time. I kind of want to look at this in a certain like lens, right? So it's based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, and he's like psychedelic free writer, and to me, both Bob and the sensei almost like lean into that kind of feeling, like where they're like, okay, so these characters are so over the top burnouts and kind of like these like 60s 70s leftovers that they don't feel fully real. They feel too over the top and good to exist. And yet, however, if you just heard what I was saying as far as the themes go, I think I'm contradicting myself here. So my main complaint was that is that like Bob's leaning a little bit too heavy on the Lebowski thing sometimes, you know what I mean? But also at the same point, he does get pretty competent about halfway through the movie, probably when the highway wears off all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the sensei, for how calm he is and how cool all of his body movements are, I mean, him being the head of a martial arts thing does make a lot of sense on how cool he would look when he's moving, because he has very much control over his body.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, who am I to hate, man? If you try to make something look cool in a movie, was that supposed to be bad, right? So I know that you just went on a journey with me and me figuring out what I think about this. The acting
Mm-hmm.
was all good across the board. I mean, I don't really have major complaints.
I think that you make a good point about Leo's character and him kind of like leaning into that. I mean, inherently, he is kind of a comic relief because the most comedic scenes in the film are with him, at least, intentionally not disturbingly comedic, because I would say the funniest character in the movie is Lockjaw, but he's also not. Um, I think that you made the point that like as the high kind of wears off, he becomes more competent, and you see more of his character's personality, and he becomes become more enriched as his character, not as like a trope, but as an actual like human. And I think that it still works, even if it's a little bit over the top, is because I mean he's a deeply, deeply traumatized person who has like one goal in life to like protect his daughter, and he's living in extreme paranoia while sober, and he's just smoking weed 24/7. He's done, he alluded to doing just a multitude of different hallucinogenics and drugs. So I think that his character, as over the top as he is, it's still realistic because he's just an extremely paranoid drug addict. So it does feel like it makes sense that he would be over the top. And I think Leo plays that combination of chaoticness and also emotional regulation and control very well. It feels authentic. And similar to Sensei's character, like he was a little bit of like that savior character that comes in and like saves the day, but he does like mess up and he's not perfect. And the way he speaks and acts, it still feels like a real person, which is important when all the other characters, at least all the other characters as they're written, don't feel like caricatures in the same way that perhaps like Lockjaw or Bob or Sensei may be. So I think it's good that, but I think both Benicio and Leo did a great job of like portraying that kind of balance.
I agree. I think to me, maybe if I was like being really nitpicky, the one performance that didn't fully work for me was Jungle Pussy. And the reason why is that when she gets on the bank like desk and she's yelling about this is what power looks like, we're doing a set it off sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel way too much like we're watching a music video for Gil Scott Heron, except for like completely corrupted, which is probably the point of it all. But it also feels in kind of contrast to what we've seen earlier from them, where they care about the message they're giving, but this doesn't feel like the same version of that message. These are probably points that are being made here because this is also after they split off after Willa's born.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I do want to say too that if I'm at no, I have no liberty to speak about like the criticism of PTA and how he like portrays black women in the movie, but I will say that if the character of if Regina Hall's character and then also Willa's character weren't central characters in the movie, it would be extremely problematic. That like we depict all these revolutionaries, and then the two black women in this group are just like the like the loud or like bombastic characters who don't have any heart in it. That would just be so extremely problematic and like very, very criticism worthy. I think that the fact that we have Willa's character and then Deandra in there as well to provide some nuance kind of just helps that. Because like you like, I think much less so Perfidia, but like I would agree about Jungle Pussy's character is that she just kind of feels like a stereotype.
Yeah, and it ends up for me just feeling off because this is where like I want to read Perfidia as a more just as oh man, I keep forgetting the word as soon as I want to say it, but like a character that you feel for, right? She's a more sympathetic character than what we give her credit for. And then I get the connection with Jungle Pussy, and it's like, well, Jungle Pussy doesn't have like a real ton of redeeming values that are shown here.
Yeah.
Like you can make up a lot of values in your head about what the community like, but you're making it up. It's not shown on the screen. So it's hard for me to give that credit and that credence.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that again, if it was just like a side character, but the fact that like she's named Jungle Pussy it kind of makes it seem like that's kind of like the motivation, that bombastic motivation is kind of spills over into the French 75 as a whole. It's like, are you like, are you just making characters of what you imagine these revolutionaries to be, or is it actually like really real people? Yeah.
And I guess, maybe you're like acting is like, you're not someone who's effectuating real change. You're someone who's portraying extreme change, and those are two different things. Like, so if you're like, hey, I want you to look like you're changing things in the craziest way possible, but realistically, you're just making the situation worse for everyone around you. Maybe this is the exact sort of character you need, and that's the exact sort of person that would join up in this particular part of the revolution.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But it attracts those different types of personalities.
Okay, so in the name of time, let's move on to our next bit. And our next bit, I'm very excited to share with y'all. We have an interview with Tisha Sloan, who plays Willa's teacher in the early high school scene. Check it out. Hi, welcome to Additional Crew Film Review. Today you got Nick and Willie, and we are interviewing Tisha from One Battle After Another. Before I jump into all that, I do want to say that this is a spoiler-heavy review, so the interview may have some spoilers as well. If you haven't seen the movie and that's something that matters to you, I say go check the movie out first, then come back. If you have been watching the review, then so I'm glad you stayed with us. With that said, Tisha, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Of course, I'm doing great. It's a good day. I'm at a really fun event that I'm looking forward to. Actually, hop in here. This is Nate. He's in charge of the Eureka Theater and the event tonight. So there's a little cameo for you. Yeah, this is an old, it's a really cool theater. You can see the glass block here. The whole building is it's 87 years old. So that's what, the 30s, 40s. So it's all very that style, very Art Deco, not spiral, like a curving double staircase up to the balcony floor, a glass block everywhere. It's a really fabulous building, and it had fallen into pretty bad disrepair until Nate and the board took over, and they've been holding all kinds of events here to raise money and refurbish the place little by little, making all these little improvements. And it's got a great stage, and we've got March 4th from Portland, the March 4th band. I don't know if you've heard. Yeah, so they're performing here tonight along with the local band, Object Heavy. So it's going to be a fun night.
That's awesome. I love that. And Eureka is a beautiful place. It's really interesting. I wanted to go to school in Humboldt State, and it didn't work out for me that way, but awesome place. We got to tour it and everything beforehand. Love that area.
Exactly. I grew up in LA and wanted to.
I love old theaters.
Yeah, it's such a neat place. Everything about this building is just really cool. The bathrooms have the old style where there's like a ante room with a fainting couch before you get into the actual bathroom. It's so neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Like those bathrooms where you're like, I could hang out in here for a little bit.
Exactly.
We'll go ahead and jump into the interview here. So, Tisha, how did you prepare for the role? Did you create a sort of backstory for your character's scene based on your own experiences?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, because that's what I always do. That's what I was trained to do. I talked to teacher friends to ask them about. I mean, I've raised 3 kids, so I've been to a lot of parent-teacher conferences on the other side of it. But I checked in with my teacher friends about, just to ask them what it's like for you. And the main thing that I took away from it was the idea that you don't really want to be there. It's after hours, you're tired, you've been dealing with the kids all day. And now especially I've got this tool of a dad to deal with. That was the main prep though, honestly, because I've been acting my whole life. So figuring out one little scene wasn't the challenge. What I did was I found every Leo movie I had access to and watched Leo movies every night for 2 weeks just to get used to his face, so that when I was sitting there across the room, it wouldn't be such a thing. I could be like, oh yeah, this is fine. It's just him.
Yeah, for sure. There's not like a ton of actors I think can do that, but Leo, it's obviously one of those, if anyone.
Yeah. When I first auditioned, I did a Zoom read with the casting director, and she really liked it, and she sent it to the director, who at the time I had no idea who she was talking about. And then she said he liked it, and they want to bring you in for an in-person read with the talent. And if you can do what you did with me in person, you've pretty much got it. And from the way she said it, I kind of understood it was going to be somebody kind of big, because what she was saying was, if you can, keep your shit together in face to face with this person, you're good. So that's what I had to do.
Nice. That's really cool. I was going to ask, so looking over your advertising material, we can see the Stanislavski method. I hope I'm saying that right.
Stanislavski. Yep.
Of acting. Stanislavski. Of acting listed as something that you're an expert in. Is that method something that you use for roles like this? And
definitely.
So can you give some details on what that specific method means for you in your work in the past?
Yeah, I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts decades ago, but that's the whole basis of their training is method work. And the idea behind method work is you find a similar experience in your own life that you can lean on to be able to portray the emotion or the behavior or whatever that the character is going through. And for this one, what I actually kind of leaned on was my bartending experience, where you have to remain very neutral and diplomatic while dealing with people who are not either of those things. So that was the work I put in there.
Yeah, that tracks. What was your favorite on-set memory?
That's a good one. I have a really good one. I was very nervous and I felt like a little dissociated the whole time, but was just like, okay, be here, be present, do that. You got this. We actually shot for a couple hours. Paul was really having us play with it a lot. We did a lot of improvising once we read it as written a few times, and then kind of wiggled around a little bit with it. And he started with the cameras pretty far away and was slowly bringing them into that really tight that it ended up being. And I was so focused and so locked in, but we were there for so long. And then at one point, because it was film, they had to stop and actually change the cans for when they ran out of film. And so we had a few minutes of downtime, and I was like, okay, we've been here long enough. I'm doing okay. I feel confident enough that I can actually take in what's going on around me. And I took that moment to kind of scan the room and checking out all the equipment and all the people, and I'm sure I was just wide-eyed. And as I swung back around to facing Leo, he was looking right at me, and he goes, stay in it, like a warning. And I was like, oh no. And I looked down and got myself back into character and looked back up at him, and he gave me a nice little nod. And the fact that he could see it, that all I did was just shift whatever inside and look back up at him, but he could see that I was back in character. I was like, yes, coming from him, especially, that was amazing. That was the best.
It was
That's
so
really
cool.
Yeah, that little subtle little check-in, and then you're back in the moment. That's really cool. I was going to ask you. You're talking about looking around the set in the room at the crew. Where exactly was this scene shot? Was it shot in an actual school, and what was the environment like?
Yeah, we were at the actual Eureka High School, the same school where they shot the dance and the bathroom scenes with Willa. And this was the very first day of shooting. This was the very first thing that was shot for the movie, which I don't think I actually knew at the time, but it made sense later, because it was all very professional, of course, and very calm and chill and welcoming. Paul and Leo and Adam Sumner, the first AD that passed away, they were all just so welcoming and chill. And my friend Cassandra Hesseltine, the local film commissioner, who hooked me up with the part. She got me the audition. She explained later that was really, a lot of that was for my benefit, that they knew this could all be very overwhelming for somebody new to it, especially with the names involved. So there was just a lot of, it was all very calm and chill. But there was definitely, so in that room, you wouldn't think for, for a little scene like that, but it was like 20 people. There's a lot of crew and a lot of equipment around us. And everyone was so professional and locked in. And when I think about it, when I found out later it was the first day, I was like, oh, of course, like everybody's on their best behavior. Everybody's really trying to make sure that they're doing it right. But Paul has this way, he's like Valium in human form. He's just so chill, and he makes everyone around feel so comfortable. And so definitely there was like an undercurrent of like nervousness or whatever you could tell, which I'm sure was because it was the first day. But overall, very calm, very just chill, and really welcoming, very warm.
What an excellent compliment. He's like Valium in human form. I mean, really, you're getting everyone super relaxed. That's great.
Right?
Speaking of like extraordinary things, so One Battle After Another is looking like a strong contender for multiple Academy Awards at this point. What's the post-release experience been like for you?
It was pretty wild. They kept reminding me, since it was the first day of shooting, so that was January of 24 that we shot it. And then they filmed for 9 months, and then they were in post, and then screenings, pre-screenings started happening. All throughout, people kept reminding me it was a small part, small scene, it might not make it. And then when the pre-screenings were happening, and all I kept hearing was that it was so long, and he had to cut, and he had to cut, and he had to cut. I was like, oh, it's not going to be in there. It's not going to make it. And so I had no idea up until about 2 weeks before it opened, when there were some of the previews were happening. And a friend of mine, Brianna Chapman, a young up-and-coming director, is in the Directors Guild, and she got to go to the DGA screening, which was the first big screening in LA leading up to the opening. And so she ended up messaging me at 11 o'clock at night, and it was on Sunday night, to say, it's in there, you're in there, it's great, everybody loved it, the room responded really well to your scene. And then I was just over the moon. I'd kind of been preparing for it just in case, getting my website ready and other things, but I really didn't know if it was going to happen. And then I got that confirmation. And so then I was just really excited. And it wasn't until the next day that it hit me that when she said, the room responded really well to your scene, the room she was in was the Directors Guild. So she's talking about Scorsese and Anderson. Like, those are the people responding well to the scene. So that's crazy. And then I got an invite to the cast, right? And then I got an invite to the cast and crew screening. I didn't get to go to the red carpet premiere. I'm nobody. I'm not gonna. So I got to go to the cast and crew screening on the Warner Brothers lot at that classic theater that you see in movies. And the A-listers weren't there, but Paul gave a little pre-speech, and then I got to sit in the room with everybody else that worked on the film and watch it in VistaVision. It was amazing. And even just driving onto the Warner Brothers lots. Like I said, I grew up in LA. I've wanted to do this my whole life, but I didn't want to live in LA, and I didn't want to raise my kids in LA. So I came up here to go to Humboldt State and raise my kids. And getting onto just driving up to the kiosk and being like, hi, my name's on a list. And like, yes, come on in. Like, that was amazing. And then when it finally opened for real here, we did a red carpet premiere thing at one of the movie theaters with some of the other kids that were in the movie and Cassandra, the film commissioner. And we got to do that here. And then I started getting calls and messages, and everybody said, I just saw you in the movie. And people here, I mean, I've lived here for 30 years, and then all of a sudden I'm going into places and people are like, hi, yes, right this way, come in. And I was like, oh, come on, it's just me. I do local commercials. I do local theater. You've seen me forever. Yes, this is a really good gig, but it was wild the way things changed. And then there was another little film shooting locally, and Cassandra invited them to the premiere, and they had another part they needed to cast. They hit her up to get in touch with me. And so I ended up shooting that the following month. And so that's coming up. And so they got in touch with me, and I ended up shooting that the next month after the movie came out. And several other people, there's a casting agent that reached out to me. She actually she did a post about the movie and how my scene in particular stood out to her so much so that she had to look me up and saw that I wasn't a movie person and that I just spent my life doing theater. And she had so much to say about that theater is what makes good acting. And it's just, she was so complimentary. And then she actually reached out to me in person. And so we're connected now. A few other directors, like lots of people have reached out, and I've connected with them like on Instagram and stuff about my performance in this scene. So it's been really neat, especially since it's something I've wanted my whole life. Like these are all little girl dreams coming true, one after the other. It's been really amazing.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I have a 5-year-old who just started kindergarten earlier this year, and I think we asked a very similar question for his like orientation with the teacher, and you nailed it. If it makes like you did, that was exactly the conversation we had. And it was like, well, what do you teach him? And they're like, well, we don't talk about it too much, and it was 100% like just so real. So
nice. Yeah, most of that actually, like I was saying, most of what ended up in the movie was improvised, including that stuff. Like we'd been there for a while at that point, and we were really just playing and going off on all kinds of tangents with the script, and him going on that rant about the forefathers, that was brand new, and even hitting the vape was a new thing, and so those reactions were very authentic.
So good.
That's so cool. I love, that scene made it into the movie, not just because it means we get to talk to you and you've had this really awesome experience, but also because the split where that scene comes in just after the scene with Benicio and Chase, just the split in tone and getting more into the family dynamic of the characters is just, it's pulled off beautifully, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And something that stands out to me about that scene as well is it has Steely Dan's Dirty Work playing over the top and in the background of your scene, which I love that song. Are you a fan of Steely Dan? And if so, do you have a favorite song of theirs?
And that would definitely be it. I was floored when that happened. Like I knew it was coming. Like once the first act was over and we had shifted to the present, and I saw, so yeah, I could tell I was like, okay, we're getting closer to where my scene would be. And that music came on, and then when it shows him in the car in front of the school and then the music's still going, I was like, yes, this is what's leading into my scene. This is awesome. I was a kid in the 70s. Classic rock is definitely my jam. Steely Dan, like I grew up with all of that. That's what I revert back to when I need some comfort music. So that's just an awesome bonus that got layered under my scene.
That's so cool. Like the serendipity of it all. It's so great.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tisha, thank you so much, first off, for answering our questions. I do want to give you some space. You've already told us about some of the work you have coming up in the future, but maybe if you want to shout out a few of the projects you got going where someone who liked your scene can go and check you out right now, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the next significant one would be the movie Dark, which it's an indie, but it's going to have a decent release later this year. I'm not sure exactly when it's coming out. And those guys were just fabulous to work with, and it's a YA sci-fi, so it's definitely got like ET vibes. And I don't want to give a whole lot away, but there's like a strange phenomenon happening in this little town, and the teenagers rise up to save the day as they do. And I play one of the teens' mom, who also happens to have Huntington's disease. So that was an actual, a bit of an acting challenge. I had to do some research and look that up, and it's a very physical condition. So it'll definitely be a different version of me to see in that movie. And then I had already signed up to do a much smaller indie that was locally shot, local everything, written by an old friend of mine, Sue Bigelow, who used to run a little theater here, and she passed away a while back. But one of her scripts got turned into a small film called Rose-Colored Glass, which is a 1930s period piece. And for that, I was just an extra, but dressing up in those costumes and hanging out with the old trolleys and the old buildings around here. And that was really fun. So those will be the next couple of opportunities to see me on the screen. I've had a couple of other auditions. I don't think anything's going to come of them just yet, just from feelings I get. And I get that. I direct as well, so I definitely don't take it personally if I'm not the right read for the part. But I'm on all the boards. I'm sending submissions. I'm definitely looking for more opportunities. I'm up here in Humboldt, but I can be anywhere the way my life is set up at this point. So just want to make sure that's out there. I'm available if people are looking. Locally, I've got the next thing is I'm directing. There's a short play festival that happens at the Exit Theater here in Arcata, and I'm directing a piece for that, and that goes up in June. And then I'll be production manager for a bigger festival at Del Arte this summer. I think that's all I have set up. Yeah, I'm so glad to have done this. I'm honored.
That was awesome.
I'm honored. Yeah, I'm honored that you guys asked. This is so neat to like get to do stuff like this. And I looked at some of your stuff, and I like your take on film. I'm looking forward to the actual review of One
you
Battle.
helped make an awesome movie,
right? Pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
Let me check my notes.
I'm excited to rewatch it for a fourth time before we do our pod.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've seen it a few times myself. It's a great movie. I mean, even when I was there at the cast and crew screening, seeing it for the first time, I forgot that I was about to see myself and that I was in Warner Brothers in LA. I was so engrossed. Paul PTA has been one of my favorite directors of all time. I couldn't believe it when I found out that's who I was going to be working with. But Magnolia is my all-time favorite movie. And I told him that, and he was like surprised. And I was like, do you not know like who you are and how good your movies are? Yeah. It's crazy. Oh, and I'm going to be not as anything. I'm just going to be attending, but I will be in LA next weekend going to a Nigerian film festival. So that's something. Yeah.
That'll probably be a lot of fun, I bet.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
So again, Tisha, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Well, you got additional crew back here rooting for you, so we hope to see something in the future, and we'll be watching it and saying, "Hey, look, there we go, let's go."
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for reaching out and having me on, and I wish you guys all the best too. It looks like you're doing some really neat work, and I'm looking forward to your review about One Battle After Another.
Thank you,
Tisha.
Yeah.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as we did, and of course, thank you, Tisha, for joining us, filling us in. It's just this sort of production, it's awesome to have someone to talk with. And Tisha, we've already said it. You did a phenomenal job. And from the bottom of my heart, that scene was awesome. You did great. We're rooting for you.
I love, like I mentioned this of other characters, and especially side characters, but like the level of nonverbal acting that she does in going toe to toe with Leo is just, it's so engaging. Like, her dismissiveness and like confusion of both like how she speaks to him, but also like the way she looks with her eyes, and then her nose twitch after he says like something about Ben Franklin and his slave owners. It's just like, it fits so well, not for like bringing you into the scene, but also it just really feels like a teacher who would be sitting across from this guy who smells like weed and is vaping in her classroom. Like it just feels so authentic.
100%. To hear that like they ended up like ad-libbing a bunch of lines and they were improvising, that must have been a lot of fun. I mean, just wild, right? Let's talk about creativity and cinematography of the film. So this is one area where typically in creativity, I talk about like the cool special effects, like the super unique things that they pop off with. And this movie is looking for a more grounded, realistic view. So I think where we'll end up talking more about is the cinematography. I will just say this: the scenes that impressed me the most, because I don't have any like crazy shots that look super beautiful. I really enjoyed the shot outside of the Oregon house when Willa's sitting on the stump.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really nice looking shot, and I'm sure there's more than that, but that's the only one I really got. But what really impressed me was the scenes that were like the one shot scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like when there was a lot of movement happening, and they were going throughout towns, and they had a bunch of people involved. And like maybe you can think of the supermarket scene where Bob goes into the bathroom, and then he's wandering through the supermarket, and then he goes and gets on the phone, and that's the first, what time is it?
Yeah.
And that's all it looks like one shot to me. And if it's not one shot, they did a really good job of making it look like one shot. And of course, those are always impressive, hard to pull off, and they give a lot of kinetic movement to the screen, and super, super important for helping out the pacing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If they had shot those in different ways, this movie would be, in my opinion, wholly different. So a great choice of cinematography and shot choice there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any like particular parts that really, really stood out to you cinematography wise?
Well, I mean, I mentioned the scene of the hill. It was maybe the pacing on that was a little bit long, but then when the actual climax of the accident happens, it feels like very like, oh, this is what we're leading up to. Okay, this is good. So I like that. I thought it was a beautiful shot of a desert. I love this scene, very simple scene, but with Lockjaw after he gets out of the car and he's like walking up the hill and doing his little march. I think that again, maybe this is more pacing, but I think that the camera lingers on him in that scene just the right amount of time. And it's just such a cool shot of like the mirage on the desert highway. It looks really cool. And I love the scene following, I forget his name, the twin character, as he's walking down the staircase to go to that Christmas Adventurers Club meeting is also really cool. And then the scene with Perfidia walking Lockjaw out and the fireworks or whatever going on in the background, and he's like in a zip ties. That was super cool shot. You see that one a lot in the trailers. That just looked cool.
There were like a couple set pieces that I think that they were used well, but not exceptionally well. Like the scene within the dojo, like using the windows to show the cop cars, right? So you've got like this framing within a framing. I It looked good. I think that like I don't know. I wanted something a little bit step up as far as cinematography goes in that particular scene, but I think that also might be a little unfair. I don't know if Paul Thomas Anderson's not seeing it. What am I seeing?
That's fair. I don't. That scene doesn't really stand out to me as much. I'm trying to recall, so maybe that's a slight criticism there as well. That it doesn't feel as maybe feels a little anticlimactic.
When he runs into the dojo, and he like, and this is Bob I'm talking about, and he ducks down because he thinks the cops are coming for him as they're out on the street, and they like are, and he goes to the back. He's looking for a weapon. That scene,
Okay,
because the dojo is such a unique filming location, especially within this movie, because it's so out of place, really. That I just think that they could have used a little bit more of it. Like there's, if you've seen these dojos, there's like colorful mats, there's images on the wall. They of course do show off the fact that the dojo has English and Spanish on it, which for a dojo I assume isn't super like regular.
yeah.
I mean, maybe it is. Don't let me tell you that it's not regular if you've seen it all the time. But like there was good pieces there. It just felt like a little underused to me.
That whole set was cool. I like that the transition between Willa and Sensei during Steely Dan's dirty work. They could have explored that set a little bit more. They also could have another thing that I wish we'd seen more of. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out with pacing, but I wanted to see more scenes in the nunnery with the sisters. I really love the cinematography in the scene with Lockjaw and Willa, and especially like the words are escaping me, but the above shot where you can see them and he's like doing the DNA test, and then when they're like he's like chasing her around, that was just, I mean, beautiful church, and I wish we had maybe had some more scenes there.
Yeah, and that was a particularly well shot scene. I do agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Again, anytime they had kinetic movement, that's what I really look for when I'm thinking what was the most impressive stuff of this movie. Like when you see the skateboarders going around the car,
Cool. Yeah.
That's great. When you see him jumping from rooftop to rooftop, I mean, I lost a little bit of sense of direction during that part, but that's okay. It still looked really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think the hardest part for me is that like it was shot very well, but I do have this hard time thinking about like the wow moments outside of it. It blends together and it's a very cohesive sort of look, and visually it all makes sense for what's going on here. And that might be it, and maybe I'm just missing some greater vision, but like my one chief complaint with the cinematography is I didn't have any super wow shots. I agree with you on the highway, the Hitchcockian thing, and it was immediately I thought Hitchcock too. I'm like, oh, this feels like you're watching North by Northwest.
That's it. Yep.
But like, this is one of those really light complaints. I'm not going super hard onto it because this is an opinion-based thing. This is 100% opinion-based. There's no objective like, wow, you really just didn't hit a composition correctly. Like, that's not it. I don't know enough about photography to say that even. But I just didn't have anything that like really struck out. I was like, oh man, this looks so much better than other versions of these type of movies I've seen.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, like, not a fair example because it's a different genre and somewhat of a different like location. But like when you compare it to something like No Country for Old Men and the use of cinematography in the desert scenes and chase sequences in the desert, you just really can't compare. Again, very different movies, but there's also chase scenes in desert scenes in that movie, and the pacing of certain chase scenes there are like there's parts of that movie that really stand out, and that's just the first movie that came to mind. But yeah, nothing nitpicky for me with cinematography, but I agree there's nothing that really stood out as like a wow shot or sequence that like really blew me away in the same level that other elements of the movie blew me away.
Mm-hmm. I think that like part of it to me might also be the color scale that they used in this, because it's pretty muted all the way throughout. Because I think of the scene with like Perfidia in the wheelchair in front with all the cops behind her, right? I think that has like an opportunity to be one of those iconic images that is produced with her with the middle finger up and all the cops behind her. And it doesn't capture me because I don't know, the colors don't pop the way I feel like it needs to, but it also wouldn't make sense with the rest of the movie because it is all pretty muted.
This is a super dumb film noob, like literal film noob question, but is the use of 70 millimeter, because I watched it on Max, but every time I saw it in the theater I saw it in 70 millimeter. Is that like lean, does that give any like, not taking anything away, but is it like perhaps some of the colors muted because of their choice to shoot on 70 millimeter? I don't know enough about the technicalities of old film
I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't either.
Okay.
That's a wonderful thought though. That could be it. I mean, like maybe this is like as organic as you can get to the film without trying to like superimpose a whole new
Yeah.
image over the top, and maybe
Yeah.
that's what I'm seeing here. Which in which case that's fair.
Yeah.
So no, it's a wonderful point because that could be it. So like if you hear me saying all these things, like it's because they shot on film. Did it? Then that's exactly what it is. I mean, like that. This is a good thought because I bet you what you're saying seems logical to me.
At least when I compare it to like other movies that were, exclusively shot on film in the 70s, and parts of that the color palette and parts of the sequences, I think based, on directional inspiration, but also just kind of, it does kind of remind me of a movie that was shot in the past. And I mean, obviously it was because it was shot on 70 millimeter, but I see a comparison there.
Yeah, one thing that always like, because you know what, I think you're right because the colors in the past were always really hard to capture, right? They had really bright colors though, or really pastel colors a lot of the times, and those would be what pops out, right? But the other thing that you would see in movies like that, and I'm for some reason my mind's going back to Thief of all movies. It's a James Caan Michael Mann flick. I think it's Michael Mann. Don't hate me if I said that wrong. A Thief.
Thief. Okay.
And
James Caan.
yeah, and what like really worked in that movie was just the usage of like light sources. And I didn't get that a lot from this film. And I guess it's really unfair for them to say you should cater to what I wanted in this movie, but I would love to see more.
It's a fair observation, and I mean I think that we're not criticizing it. I think that in my interpretation, I'm pointing out things that could have been different or added more to just an already incredibly rich story. Like if they had every element, everything popped like the story and the acting do, then it would have elevated for me for sure.
Is there anything else you want to talk about specifically with creativity and cinematography? I might move through these pieces quick simply for time reasons, but otherwise,
I think we hit it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about editing pacing. So this is a 2-hour 37-minute film. I said that off the top of my head. I think that's right. It's at least very close to that. 2 hours 37 minutes films always are going to get 2 hour 41 minute film.
Okay, close.
I'm always going to say this to start off with. As a parent, almost 3-hour movie is pretty rough, guys. I'm just gonna be real with you. It's not that I'm saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just telling you, you're like hurting, you're cutting your audience potential size down by making movies this long. However, you try to think about pieces that could have been cut from this movie. Yeah, I think like a lot of the things that you'd cut would have had to lead to a cascade of cuts that would have changed a lot of themes.
Well said. Yeah, I agree. I think that, yeah, if you start to like pull little pieces out of the movie, it just takes away from the overall film, and then you would have to take out other things in order for it all to kind of like comprehend at the same pace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like, okay, for me, the part you can kind of get rid of is when Willa's friends are talking about her cell phone,
Uh-huh.
and like they're trying to figure out if they have the number or not, and if they could track it or not. Uh, it's not a long period, but it's like also okay, we can just accept at this point that the government can track the numbers. I think that's been established well enough that like if you just found out she had a phone, that would be enough.
Would be enough. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but then I also, yeah, like you said, like I also just enjoy that scene because it's like the contrast between the interrogating soldier and the non-binary friends of Willa is just so amusing, and like, and not in a way that's
Mm-hmm.
like cheap for laughs. It's just like it's just amusing, you know.
It's funny because you have like I do agree because you have the high school kids and they're answering earnestly, but it still seems like they're like pushing back just because they're 14, 15, 16 years old. They're kind of idiots, you know what I mean? And that's not their fault. They're kids. So they're being asked, like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. If the kid actors had been like more like over the top or like dramatic with their role, it wouldn't have felt as real. Because like, of course, they're talking. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for like what it would look like if it was really happening on both sides.
You talked about it earlier, but the chase scenes near the end, I have to wonder how many times they needed to show the cars driving. But that's a nitpick. I don't even know how much time you would actually shave off if you were trying to like keep the tension up. Probably not
Yeah,
much.
I agree. That was also something that like I really enjoyed the buildup of that, but also like it's a hill and then another hill and then another hill. And if the scene hadn't ended at the top of the hill, but it would have been like what the hell are we doing here? So at least there was a climax there that fit that shot sequence. But I agree.
I can't hate on the editing pacing too much. For a 2 hour 41 minute movie, it didn't feel like it had super lulls, which is also a feat within itself.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that runtime every single time. I'm like, man, this is where like don't listen to me because I don't want to be the movie producer dude who's saying you need to shorten your movie for no real reason. You don't.
I will say I think like the acting and the pacing might have been my favorite parts of the movie because just not only is it a long movie, just objectively, but like so much happens and it's impressive. My big nitpick, my big movie snob thing is that like I hate movies that both like really embellish exposition and just explain things way too much, or movies that like are both shorter and then just paced so quickly. I like a slower burn pace for a movie as long as there's action and character development, and this movie has that. So that's my kind of movie is movies that are like slower burn pace but also like are engaging because it's easy to like be a really well made, well crafted movie, well acted movie that is slow paced and then just kind of has lulls. And this movie, in my opinion, doesn't have lulls, which is impressive to pull off. I think.
Agreed, 100%. I really think a lot of the movement had to do with that. Like they made an active choice to make the kinetic energy during
Mm-hmm.
so many of those scenes very important. Not important, but forefront. It was a forefront because it kept the pacing moving. You were feeling like you were moving along with everybody.
With the characters themselves, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
It felt like you were in real time at for moments. You're like the 5 minutes that have passed in the screen are the 5 minutes that have passed for this guy.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Um, yeah, other than that, editing, pacing, we'll blow right through that. Sound music. Um, you know more about the soundtrack immediately than I do. So tell me about the soundtrack.
Yeah, so the score itself, obviously the one that the piece that stands out would be the we talked about Quasi Wizard of Oz piano done by Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, I believe. He's worked with PTA on a few films. I know he did the score on Phantom Thread, um, and I want to say There Will Be Blood, but I think I'm wrong about that. But anyway, he's worked at PTA in the past, and the soundtrack, and especially the primary score, it's a little bit. It kind of becomes a character in and of itself, especially in that the scene in Balkan Cross when Sensei and Leo are trying to escape. It's a little overbearing at times, but in my opinion, I think it leans to both like chaos, but also like controlled chaos, which is what we see from the characters themselves. And I think that, like, I don't know. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know how kind of on the surface goofy the score is. Like, it's just like some piano movements, bop, 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 and it's a little weird and awkward, but like it's not so distracting that it takes out of the film, but it's also so chaotic that it matches the energy of the film. Um, little criticism, I think it maybe goes on a little bit too long at times, but I do like the uniqueness of the score, and I think it matches the characters.
That Backton Cross scene, that has to be playing that same song for like it feels like 20 minutes straight.
It really does, yeah.
And the music, I think I can understand because like it's got enough gaps in noise to allow for the tension to build. So like a lot of these scenes, there's very tense ideas and people are getting chased, right? But without the soundtrack, I have to wonder how tense it would be.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for movies to pull off tense moments without a soundtrack. Again, I'm going back to the example for No Country for Old Men because that's the first movie that comes to mind that really does this perfectly. But if there was no soundtrack, or it was a very subtle, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like subtle, but also just like not unoriginal, but just like not unique enough soundtrack that was going on in the background, it would have just felt like, okay, this is like the music we're putting in here, but it doesn't like really build. It doesn't add anything to the film. Like it's important to be there because a lack of soundtrack would be, awkward and unnoticeable, but it doesn't like add to the tension, I should say. It kind of just is just kind of there. So I think that the soundtrack is as long as it is at times, and at times occasionally maybe takes you out of it just a little bit, I think it's a good choice.
Agreed. I my only complaint really with it is when it starts to get too Wizard of Ozzy near the end. Because it just gives me like a different vibe than what's happening in the movie, right? You've got a dad dropping his daughter off to get killed, and you've almost got this like fantasy soundtrack happening over the top of it, and the parts where it's building up that tension, great. But every single time I hit that, I couldn't help but think of Wizard of Oz.
Fair, yeah.
It was getting to me a little bit near the end. I was like, oh my gosh, stop.
I think there was the second viewing, I think I enjoyed it a bit more because I knew what happened, and like I knew like where they were going. But like when I first watched it was a bit more jarring. I think it was like, okay, it was taking me out of it a little bit. There's two needle drops in the movie that come to mind for me. One I really enjoyed, and one not so much. The one I enjoyed, we talked about a bit in the interview with Tisha, was Dirty Work by Steely Dan. I really enjoy Steely Dan, and I just think that song playing in the background as we're introduced to modern day Bob and then Willa's character is really good because it's a simple enough song, and it just kind of fits the comedy and the human interaction in that back and forth between Willa and Sensei and Bob and Tisha pretty well. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a good choice, and it also like it really perfectly splits the first arc of the film with Perfidia and the French 75 into this more like family dynamic that we see in modern day. And I think it's a good song choice for that. The other needle drop that I just pretty indifferent towards is the American Girl song by Tom Petty that plays at the end. Like, okay, I can't unassociate that movie or that song with can't unassociate that song from Silence of the Lambs. So that's part of it for me. So I'm a little biased there, but okay, like, yeah, okay, she's going off to like going to a protest for friends, and she's a badass American girl. Like, okay, yeah, we get it. Okay, I don't know, maybe just maybe a bit of an overused song, or like not really on the nose, but just kind of like, okay, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the needle drops?
So for Dirty Work, I like it because it's also like a representation of Bob just filling in as the parent, right? Because the parent, like I said earlier, it's the dirty work. No one really wants to do that.
Yeah,
but it's like such an important part of the development of the person, and he's been doing it. Here he is, multiple years down the line, well worse for wear.
Yep.
Still doing it. Oh yeah, it's just a fantastic song. It does change the tone of the movie right at that moment because like it had gotten kind of heavy in that first part at the end,
Mhm.
and it changes it back to like okay, let's lighten it up a little bit. We're
Yeah,
gonna show off this now.
yeah.
The American Girl needle drop. I Tom Petty, from what I understand, as a person, what he thought. I like the dude. The music has been like it was way too overplayed when I was young.
Sure.
But you know, like this is the dude who played Buck in King of the Hill, so you get to try to get me to hate Tom Petty. I can't do it. But also, like, I think that the use of a song like as well known with an implication like this that has American Girl in it is kind of a way to take that term back a little bit to say
Mhm.
like this is a version of an American Girl. It
Because
does
it's a patriotic song. I mean, at least
Mhm.
a lot of people interpret it that way, maybe incorrectly, but yeah.
Exactly, and I think like that the fact that it can be interpreted that way incorrectly shows well. Let's use it more correctly.
I like that. I didn't really think about that. You know, the themes of the song, the lyrics in that song, as well as "Dirty Work." I mean, "Dirty Work" works well instrumentally in that scene, but also like, yeah, Bob's doing the dirty work that I'm a fool to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. That's a really nice touch. I maybe just kind of wish that they had done an instrumental at the end because Tom Petty's distinct voice, as much as I enjoy that song, like it does just kind of take me out of that sequence with Bob and Willa, and it's the very end of the movie. You know, if it had been in a different part, I don't know where, but like if it had, the fact that it's the end and the movie after all that epicness and all that, the themes have been on screen, like we're just ending with a fade to black and Tom Petty's voice, like. I want something a little bit different. So maybe like an instrumental would have worked better for me there. But I do like the connection of the lyrics and the themes of a song to like what the scene is trying to convey.
Which makes sense to me. Yeah, for me, it's like all in that first like stanza of the song, right? It's that like she was an American girl raised on promises. She couldn't help thinking that there was a little bit more to life somewhere else. You know what I mean? So it's just like this has been used wrong forever. Use it for the revolutionary. Use it for the person who is fighting to make things better, as opposed to the people who are like, I'm all on the front lines, keeping things the way they are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that complacency. Yeah,
I do agree that like Tom Petty, and this is unfortunate. Like I said, I like Tom Petty as a dude. Every single thing I've heard about him, and it was, gosh, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't read it, but everything that I've seen has had him as a pretty upstanding dude who cared a lot for other people, and you
Mhm.
know made a lot of choices to try to get his music out there for the right things. But, and this is a big but, he was so overplayed in the 2000s and the 90s that my god, if every time I hear a song I can't help but thinking of like just a barbecue with a bunch of like it just doesn't fit. I don't know, like the mood doesn't fit as well as the actual lyrics do.
yeah, and his voice, I agree. I think an instrumental "Born in the USA" would have been good. Maybe not Bruce in there, but like just that "Born in the USA" instrumental, that might be
Mm-hmm.
would have hit a little
Mm-hmm.
harder for me. I also just I can't detach American Girl from Buffalo Bill and his little goggles watching. I just can't. I can't get out of that.
No, that's pretty fair. That'd be like
Yeah,
if they'd use Inagata to Vita, right? Like you can't do that anymore. It's been used. It's done.
yeah, yeah,
Like, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to steal the memory of this song from a different cinematic moment.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the needle drops rather inconsequential overall, because there's not many.
Yeah, that's
The high school dance song.
Mobamba.
It's not even that it's a bad song. It's just it brings me back to like that time in my childhood that I'm just deeply embarrassed by for even existing at that time.
Yeah,
So,
I felt like I felt sweaty in that school dance scene, like I was
but they're all
14
still
again.
singing the freaking song when the music
Yeah,
stops and you hear the kids yelling it. It was shot well. I could always do without hearing that song, but that's okay.
I imagine PTA just asked his daughter. He's like, "Hey, what songs were they playing at your last school dance? Let's put that in there."
Right, right. It's the right time for that to come back.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about this movie. Let's move into the final little segment here. our 3 favorite scenes of the film. One of these days, I'm going to get that cadence to line up perfectly with the song. One of these days. I'll go ahead and I'll start us off here. I'll give my 3 favorite scenes real quick. My first favorite scene is the Mexican raids scene, and by that I mean when the sensei is helping out Bob, but his primary focus is actually on getting the people out of his store and into the tunnels and into safety.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that part in particular, and it was played as like almost this background issue, which it was this background issue because Lockjaw wasn't actually there for this. This was just like false flag. I need to show that I'm here to take these guys, but it's a real issue for them. But they're so prepared for it that he plays it off so calmly and coolly. Just the most interesting part of the movie for me, and it was the part that had the most kinetic energy. I just really like this, and the dynamics between everyone in the store and in the complex up above the store was played off so well. Just phenomenal. The office scene at the end of the movie with Lockjaw, which we didn't even talk about.
That was yep.
Yeah, when he thinks he's getting in still, and of course we know that he's not. Like we already know, and you find out that basically he has done all of this death and destruction and mayhem, all so he can get a corner office with a view. That's it. And then he still doesn't get it. He tastes the corner office for 1 second, puts his feet up, and then he gets killed.
In such a funny way too.
Mm-hmm. He gets gassed.
Yeah.
He can't, like, all of this pain and suffering that he caused to all of these people. And as soon as he was done doing it, they immediately turned their back on him and killed him too. Just the sheer ruthlessness and carelessness, like, and played in a way that you get to watch a guy who clearly deserved what he got. He deserved what he got, like, well before that. But you still feel kind of like, wow, can you imagine you've dedicated your life to hatred and all you got back in return was hatred? It was an important scene for me as far as what happens within these cultures. And then, no bias, maybe a little bit bias. The teacher scene, that beginning scene with the dirty work playing over the top, like, it is just so good at establishing their characters immediately just by showing you these little teeny bits. And then Bob and the way he acted with that teacher, and the teacher, the way she reacted to him was perfect. It really, I've had these conversations. I have a kid who's in kindergarten first year. Almost the exact same question about, like, do you teach history, like the real history? They're like, well, we try not to really, like, mess with them too much, but yeah, we'll tell them the truth.
Yeah,
it just felt real. It felt very real. So awesome scene.
It was, I love how that scene breaks down the first arc and the second arc just so well.
Mm-hmm.
The acting, the music choice, we talked about it a lot, but it's just great. I will start off with a shared favorite scene. I can't leave out the end sequence with Lockjaw and him getting gassed. And I especially love that scene just because he's so pathetic in that scene. And I love that the scene with him getting his body getting burned and, disposed of by the Christmas Adventurers Club is overlaid with Perfidia's letter to her daughter. And just like how in that moment, like, she won, regardless of the dynamic between them. And, like, we talk about the nuances of that and, like, the legitimacy of her recognizing him as his father or him as her father. But, like, the fact that she's writing this beautiful letter to her daughter while his pathetic corpse is being burned by white supremacists is just so funny. Like, it's just very poetic justice. And I love that scene so much. So funny. I also really enjoyed the scene. And this is honestly just because of how I felt during the scene. But just like when Sensei rescues Bob from the hospital and they're driving away and just the camaraderie and they, like, take a selfie and it's just kind of goofy, but I like movies that have such important themes and have had so much action just to take a moment for the characters to, like, authentically and emotionally connect and, like, reevaluate. I like that they include a scene like that in there where there's no action. I mean, obviously there is because he's escaping, but, like, there's, like, a breather moment, and the chemistry between him and between Benicio and Leo in that scene is, like, so on display. And I love a scene with, that it leads to with Leo escaping out the car door, or the car window rather, and the build up to that was really exciting. And then of course the iconic a, a few small few small beers and the smirk that Benicio gives. Like I mean, it's been talked about a lot, and his character's been like, talked about a lot. But I just, it's just like it's just a great scene. I love the build up of all that. That's, I guess it's like a few scenes kind of split up, but that like whole arc.
I do want to say when he says you're a bad hombre, I
Mhm.
love that little bit because he's like recognized. He's like, oh, maybe you did suck. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I'm just gonna. Yeah, it's just cute. I don't know. I just love it. Um, and then I don't know, maybe a favorite scene, like personal scene, because the other two are personal favorites, but another scene that just really stood out to me was when Lockjaw confronts Willa at the monastery, and he's doing the DNA test, and that tension, because it's so simple. Like he's just there, and he's like waiting to find out if you know uh, she's his daughter, and then she doesn't really know what he's doing, but she has an inkling, and that tension that builds, and their chemistry, like honestly, like Chase and Sean's chemistry is like a father daughter with a abhorrent dynamic, and that it just comes across as really really good. Like I believe it's like the only scene they have together where there's a lot of discourse and plot buildup that goes on, and it's just really good. They work really well together, and I was just like really on the edge of my seat that entire time. Even though, like as the audience, we probably strongly suspect that he is in fact her father because it makes sense for the plot and everything and his motivation. But it's just like I was on the edge of my seat. Like it was just really really good, and also like you don't know exactly what's going to happen because his goal is to quote bag and tag Bob, but like he wants to apprehend Willa's characters. Like, is he going to kill her? Like, what's like? There's just so much tension there, and the scene itself is quiet, and it works really well for me.
It also gets me to like think about like what does Willa like what's going through Willa's mind during all these scenes where he's talking to her, because now it's not only like was it a lie all of the
Mm-hmm.
life that she was living before this, but also she's getting completely just destroyed by her actual dad now, the person who like I shouldn't say actual dad, but the person who is biologically responsible for her is just completely destroying her character and
Yeah,
absolutely evil towards her.
and the dynamic of it, not only she built up in her head about like her own lineage from Leo's character, but the fact that he's disparaging her mom and like that whole like, and like obviously, and then and like right before that when she learns that her mom was a rat, like that's just there's just so much like Chase is really really good in that scene, and her and Sean just really go toe to toe in that. It's just a great scene.
Yeah, it's interesting because you normally associate that level of like immediate trauma with like hiding or reserving yourself, especially in like a movie setting, right? And instead, she
Mm-hmm.
immediately turns towards fight,
Yeah,
and that does build up this like idea that she's got it in her no matter what, because she is taking haymaker emotionally left and right there.
yeah.
There's no part of that that had to have been easy. And the only time we
No,
really see it affect her is after she shoots her first dude, right? Like then and she's still ready to go. Like her default is fight, is not flight. And anyway, agreed. Awesome scenes.
yeah.
Um, okay, let's do final reviews. Willie, I'm gonna go first because I want you to be able to gush without me coming in here afterwards and maybe like a slightly lower score. We've talked
Okay.
enough about it. I'm just going to give you some numbers. So my story is a 4, acting is a 4, cinematography creativity is a 3, editing pacing 4, sound music 4. That's a 7.6 out of 10. Um, strong movie though. Like you've heard what I've said. I think it's got a lot of good parts about it. My only issue is that like the wow factor or like the parts that are like really deeply connected with me in certain ways. I don't know. It's a movie that I'll have to rewatch because I think that ultimately I think it was very poignant. It had a lot of really good messages. It had a good story, but like the deeper level connection onto the humanity of the person feels like it might be too timely.
Yeah, maybe not time to like just see it again, but to like give it a couple years and then digest it too.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah.
this is by no means like that's one, in my opinion, a pretty respectable score, and two, you absolutely should watch it.
Yeah, it's it's hard for me. So like my rubric grading, it's almost impossible for me to give a movie a 5. Like I've given very few. Like I have some movies that I like have seen many times that I see as a little bit flawed or not perfect, but I still can't give like a full 5. But I think having said that, like I do want to give the story a 5. The acting is a 5 for me. The creativity and cinematography, 4.5. Editing, pacing, probably closer to 4.5, but bias side, I'm going to give it a 5. The sound, probably a 4. I think overall, it's hard for me to give a movie a 5, but this is my favorite movie I saw last year, and I want to give it a solid like 4.8.
Yeah,
And it's not even with nitpicking. It's just there's only so much they can do to convey all these just nuanced and relevant and emotional and political themes in one movie. But I think that for what it is, and especially just the cast and the crew they assembled for the big and small parts, is so unbelievably impressive to me when you look at the scope of what the novel is and what they're trying to portray. It just absolutely hits it out of the park for me. I have not seen all of PTA's filmography. I think my personal favorite is still Magnolia, but I think this is his best movie he's made that I've seen. Just really, really hits it out of the park for me.
I didn't look over the PTA filmography, unfortunately, so I don't want to take a random guess here. Probably should, but it's hard not to like Boogie Nights and what it represented at that time.
I've still never seen Boogie Nights.
I don't think it'll be as good as it used to be. I think times have changed a little bit in ways that are like make that a little bit more negative. And of course, Mark Wahlberg, like it's hard to like him as much as maybe people used to, you know.
There.
But yeah, I love John C. Reilly also, so that really helps me in that, and he's in that film. Anyway, yeah. So check it out. Thank you for listening, hanging out with us. Shout out to Tisha again. Thanks for giving us an interview, Tisha.
Shout out Tish.
Yeah, for sure. That was an awesome interview. Good stuff happening over the Eureka Theater as well. So, shout out to them. The next movie you'll hear from us in 2 weeks after this release date is Love and Monsters from 2020. So this is kind of a movie that released in October of 2020. It has a fairly large budget, and it just got completely overlooked because October of 2020 was a black hole for media. It was supposed to have a theatrical release, and of course it didn't really, because theaters didn't really exist at that time. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to see if, like, hey, was it worth rechecking out? So watch that film. Listen to us 2 weeks. Until then, ocean waves. Ocean waves. Ocean waves.